Yes.
Awesome. All right, we'll give like 2-3 more minutes just so people get settled with the Zoom password and Zoom link and everything, and then we'll start. And in the meantime, you can have a look at the agenda we have for today. We'll give 3 more minutes to start. We're just giving a few more minutes for people to get settled into the Zoom, and then we'll start in 2 minutes. All right. All right, we're going to get started. So welcome, everyone. I'm just going to give a very, very quick introduction to what's happening here and to who am I. So welcome to the Computer Science Department at the University of Chicago. My name is Pedro Lopes. I'm one of the faculty members that works in areas adjacent to human-computer interaction. And today we're reusing, actually, a recorded meeting that we have about HCI, where we invite our students. It's called the HCI Club. We invite our students to come and engage with us, faculty that kind of do related topics with HCI. And we're reusing it to do this Chicago Symposium, where all our students that had accepted papers in this Chi 2020, the premier venue for HCI that unfortunately got canceled due to this whole COVID thing, they get this chance to come and present their full talks and hear questions from you, engage with you, and engage with each other too. I'm very excited. We already have 50 people on the line, and we have many more watching from the YouTube. We'll try to pull questions from the YouTube too. But if you're here on the Zoom, you have prime time to just ask questions by putting them on the chat or raising hands, and the session host will try to watch out for that and let you ask your questions or repeat your questions in case you put them in the chat. If you could just raise your hand and ask them yourselves, that's even better. So So again, you probably can see everyone. We're going to have 8 talks and 3 sessions. The sessions will be chaired by faculty members in our areas that relate to HCI. I'll introduce them in a second. But before that, I also wanted to give a special welcome to Sarah Sivo. I think she's on the line. Sarah, are you on the line? Can you hear us?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, cool. So Sarah is a new faculty in our department. Hey, Sarah. And if you're a student, we're super happy to have you. If you're a student of UChicago trying to get into HCI, and especially into human-robot interaction, you should check out the work that Sarah's been doing. She's amazing, and her work's truly amazing. And you can even chat with her right here on the Zoom chat. Jumping directly into what's going to happen today, we have 8 papers split into 3 sessions. The first session is going to be chaired by Ben Zhao. This is a session on illusions and mirages. Second session is on detection, a lot of privacy heavy session, and of course is chaired by one of our privacy masters, Blaise Er. And the session number 3, the closing session, also handed out by one of our privacy masters, is on privacy and ads, and that's by Marsh Nichetti, who you already had a chance to see on Zoom here today. So all these folks are around after the talks as well, in case you want to engage more with them. And then without further ado, let's start. I'll hand this off to Ben Zhao, who's going to lead us into the first session called Illusions and Mirages. All right, Ben, you have the floor.
All right, great. Thanks, Pedro. So again, a nice warm welcome to all of you. If you're in Chicago, you'll see the weather today is not too far away from Hawaii, although, you know, we're not getting there the palm trees or the ambience, but we're going to do our best to try to reproduce the atmosphere. Welcome to all of you, and then also special welcome to Sarah. Welcome. So yes, let's get the show started. I think you know, I'm chairing the first session, and up first we're going to have Jazz Brooks giving a talk on, you know, I still have trouble pronouncing this word. Pedro, you can, and Jazz, you can correct me if I'm butchering this. Is Trigeminal-based temperature illusions. This stuff is crazy. When I first heard Pedro and Jazz were working on this, I was like, this is insane. But this is the stuff that has real impact. So also kind of best paper award this year. So Jazz, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Okay.
Jazz is a PhD student here working with Pedro. Yeah, Jazz, take it away.
Okay. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully things are actually functioning correctly. All good? I'll assume so. So hi, everyone. My name is Jazz Brooks, and today I'll be talking about how to create sensitive temperature changes using a special nerve in our body called the trigeminal nerve. So this work was done in collaboration with my colleague, Stephen Noggles, and my advisor, Pedro Lopes at the University of Chicago. And I'd also like to start by thanking the Kai community for receiving the Best Paper Award. We're really honored by the recognition. So I'll be talking about how this person is actually feeling the temperature in the virtual scene using a very low-powered device that we built specifically for that effect. Now, this work is motivated by how virtual reality has become increasingly realistic. Here I whipped up 2 scenes fairly quickly that are already pretty photorealistic here. In addition to kind of like visual realism, industry and researchers have also been exploring other modes of realism for virtual reality, such as touch, force feedback, rendering odors in some cases, or even rendering the temperature of virtual scenes. In fact, I'm going to be covering right now how researchers have begun creating this kind of thermal feedback in virtual reality for consumer headsets in particular. Now, the most straightforward approach to do this is using something called heat lamps or air conditioning units. I think most people are familiar with that, to change a large volume of air's temperature. And this kind of structure can be found in things like custom VR arcades like the VR Sense. However, these devices usually require a lot of power and end up being big, which usually runs contrary to what the commercial VR industry is running towards, which is untethered devices. In fact, VR's biggest promise is small home setups or portable systems like the Oculus Go that you see on the left, or more recently, the Oculus Quest that's on the right. In the end, it's really about giving users mobility and staying untethered. Now, researchers have actually started miniaturizing this kind of thermal feedback using things called thermoelectric materials, aka Peltier elements for most people's common knowledge. And what's nice about these is that they can be really small. Essentially, when you pass a current through it, it creates a temperature difference across the surface. So one side gets hot and the other one gets cold. Unfortunately, to sustain that temperature difference, you need an equivalent sum of power, and that can get pretty costly quite quickly. And that means that these devices are going to be small, but usually remain tethered. So if we take something like the Thermo VR system, which is based on Seto and Miyamoto's method of fast temperature switching, to create a 10-minute full frontal cold sensation using this device, you'll have to turn on 10 Peltier elements, cool down the skin by -3 degrees Celsius on each one. And in a worst case scenario, each of these Peltier elements are going to take 0.5 amp hours. That means that the whole thing's going to take about 5 amp hours. And that's about 1.5 times your phone's battery life. So, whoops, sorry. So our goal is kind of looking at whether or not we can bypass that need for a lot of power. And that kind of means that we have to not address this problem with a solution bounded by physics. To do that, we instead looked at a thermal illusion that relies on chemically actuating our senses. And for that, we especially focused on the chemical systems and the chemical senses in the head, especially the ones in our nose. Now, most people are probably familiar with things like the tongue, which is going to taste things, or the olfactory bulb to smell stuff. But there's actually a third thing in your head called the trigeminal nerve. And most people actually associate it to the first two things. So when you're eating or smelling, this kind of nerve sensations are recognizable when you're experiencing bubbly, spicy, sparkly, or refreshing things. Now, what's interesting about this nerve is that it responds to mechanical deformation, as well as having receptors that respond specifically to temperature changes. So let's take Chicago, for example, if it was the winter. Now, if you walk outside and it's -10 degrees Celsius, that refreshing feeling that you have when you breathe in, the crispness, that's in fact your trigeminal nerve that's responding. The trick is that the receptors are responding to the temperature change of the tissue. And these receptors not only respond to temperature, but also respond to chemical stimuli, which begs the question, maybe we can elicit these kinds of sensations with only chemicals. For this, we actually looked at two specific receptors, and these are called transient receptor cation channels. TRPV1, which is temperature gated by hot temperatures, so 45 degrees Celsius and above about, and then TRPM8, it's a cold receptor, so gated by temperatures 25 degrees Celsius and below. Now, remember, this is temperature of your tissue, and that's pretty cold for your body if you're going to go down to 25 degrees Celsius, or really hot when you get to 45 degrees Celsius. Now, what's of interest with these is that you can actuate them with extracts that are commonly found in plants. For example, capsaicin in peppers, or menthol that's in mint. In our case, what we were interested in was looking at whether we can just use readily available essential oils, as well as easily accessible chemical compounds to create this illusion. So to do that, the first step we had to do was implement a prototype thermal display. Now, in fact, in our case, what we did was create an untethered olfactory display. So here you're going to see a phone actuating it wirelessly. And the device includes a Bluetooth microcontroller for that wireless communication, a set of micropumps to actually pump around the chemical compounds, 1 milliliter reservoirs, 3 of them in this case, and then a mesh atomizer to create a fine mist. Now, what this allows us to do is do things like emit capsaicin to create a warming sensation. And that's pretty easily done by just pumping some of the capsaicin compound from one reservoir out to the mesh, will create the aerosol. Similarly, we can do things like emit eucalyptal to create kind of a cooling sensation for people. Or, and this is fun, actually do mixtures. So we could do capsaicin plus a smell like a floral odor, for example. Now, when we're designing the device itself, we had to address two specific problems that were going to arise. The first was that capsaicin doesn't evaporate at the same temperature as alcohol. In fact, it needs a really high temperature for that to happen. So we couldn't end up using something like evaporation to actually deliver the compound. Instead, we have to keep everything in liquid phase. To do that, we use something called a vibrating mesh transducer, which has a bunch of like tiny holes, and that creates an aerosol of like fine, tiny droplets. That means that we can just atomize suspensions or keep everything in liquid phase that gets to the nose as it is. So capsaicin was able to be atomized. Second, because we're only using one atomizer and we have multiple channels of liquids, in this case 3, it really becomes paramount to try and reduce cross-contamination. In other words, we just want the selected channel to be outputted. So in our case, to try and avoid this, we actually made sure that each of the channels had their own separate reservoir, set of tubing, and micropump. But on top of that, we actually added something called a capillary tube to the end of each channel. Now, what this does is constrict the flow a lot so that there's a high surface tension in the liquid. And when the micropump actually creates a droplet, the droplet gets picked up really quickly by the vibrating mesh transducer and gets aerosolized. On top of that, when you have these capillary tubes, it's really hard for backflow to happen. So if one channel outputs and then the other one's, it like kind of like covers another channel, it doesn't like flow back into the channel's tubing. This means that we can actually only do mixture at the point of atomization and further reduce any kind of potential cross-contamination that might be happening. Now, the last thing that we ended up doing in this case, I think it's going to play, I think it just needs one more, was make the actual reservoirs easily accessible so that people could quickly remove a reservoir, swap out a compound, or even do refilling in this case. Now, what's interesting about this device is that when you're rendering temperature with it, it only requires 0.25 watts, which, as we saw, sometimes these Peltier elements can actually cost 50 times more, and that's a stark contrast. So in our first study, we had to actually determine what would be the best candidates for these kinds of sensations. So we searched for compounds in medical and olfactory literature that could be easily used in a VR experience, and selected 6 candidates that can be diluted with ethanol. So in this case, we have 3 warm candidates that were selected for activation of warm TRP channels, including thymol, cayenne pepper tincture, which in this case I'll be referring to as capsaicin, because that's what we ended up using for our capsaicin condition, and methylsalicylate, as well as 3 additional compounds for their activation of cool TRP channels, including linalool, eucalyptyl, and peppermint essential oil, of which the last one has a large concentration of menthol. Of note is that 2 of these compounds, methylsalicylate and linalool, activated a combination of both cool and warm TRP channels. Now, to verify that these compounds are contributing to the temperature sensation that we're getting, we ended up using the solvent as a baseline. So the only difference between the baseline and any of these candidates is the trigeminal stimulant being added. It's actually a chemical compound. And participants were asked to inhale about 1 microliter of each compound, and were asked to then rate the perceived temperature. So the first thing that we ended up seeing was that linalool and methylsalicylate both elicit a wide range of temperature sensations, and that lines up with how they both activate hot and cold TRP channels. Then we found that peppermint essential oil and thymol actually elicited the strongest temperature sensations for participants. The downside for these was that not only could people smell them, but they were able to identify them. So that means you could tell if there's an odor there, and then you can be like, yeah, this is minty, like peppermint essential oil. Unfortunately, in contrast, what we're looking for are compounds that optimize 2 aspects. 1, that they elicit the temperature sensation, and then 2, they don't break the illusion by suddenly being recognized as a particular odor. Luckily, eucalyptyl and capsaicin satisfy these criteria. So most participants were not able to identify eucalyptyl, even though they could smell it. And on the other side of the spectrum, participants couldn't distinguish capsaicin from the baseline. in part because capsaicin on its own is an odorless compound. Of interest in all this is that participants were able to do these distinguish all these candidates with only tiny 1 microliter volumes. That's really small. So that meant we could use small quantities of eucalyptal and capsaicin to then test the temperature illusion in virtual reality. For that, we placed participants in a VR environment that either had a temperature congruent stimulant or the baseline solvent. In this case, for example, the cold mountain would have menthol eucalyptal as its temperature congruent trigeminal stimulant, or in the baseline case, just the ethanol. Turns out participants were able to feel significantly warmer or colder with the stimulants than without them. And that really confirmed that the temperature illusion held up with visually congruent information in virtual reality. So here you can see that for the cold mountain, they felt much colder with the eucalyptal, and for the desert, they actually felt warmer with the capsaicin solution. So we took all this together and put it with our prototype and created a VR scene demonstrating the full experience, which I'm going to walk people through, partially because there's no audio, I think. So here are the users in the cabin in the woods, warming up next to a furnace. And to render that warm sensation, we actually emit capsaicin, which activates the TRPV1 channel in the trigeminal nerve, and it's an odorless warming sensation. Warm right now. And then because there's a storm, power goes out, and the floor is swung open, so it gets pretty cold. And we start emitting eucalyptal instead to activate the TRPMA channel of the trigeminal nerve and create that cooling sensation. Now, because it's cold and the person doesn't want to stay cold, you're going to go outside and look for the emergency electricity generator. Because it's colder outside, we actually emit eucalyptal more frequently to create a colder sensation. I finally get to the emergency generator, switch it on, and because there's a little bit of warmth coming from it, we're going to emit capsaicin again. But we don't just do that, we actually throw in even a little bit of a rubbery odor to create kind of a sensation of a burning fuel smell. So here, we're not just doing temperature rendering, we're also kicking in olfactory rendering. Now that the power's on, go back inside. On that way, close the door. At which point we stop the eucalyptal, since there's no more cold air, and kick back in the capsaicin. At which point they can go back to the furnace and just warm up. Now, to conclude, we introduced a new way to create temperature changes in VR using an illusion. In fact, the illusion is about 52 times more efficient than Peltier's, but it's still an illusion. So the current range of sensation is quite limited. But this provides a venue of research / investigating synthetic compounds that can kind of like activate those receptors even more than the current ones. For example, there's a synthetic compound called isolin for the cold TRPMA channel that's about 50 times colder than menthol and has no smell. At the moment, the area of effect is localized to the face, but several participants actually mentioned the feeling expanding away from the face and like onto the chest as well, or the rest of the body. The temperature sensation right now is tied actually to the user's inhalation, which would make sense considering it's an odor. But it's also a situation where users might unconsciously adjust their breathing to minimize exposure to certain compounds. At the moment, the device also relies on reservoirs, where each reservoir has a maximum capacity of about 2 hours or so, which isn't too bad. And the battery life actually lasts even longer than the reservoirs. However, it's worth noting that this actually provides a pretty easy upgrade for any existing olfactory displays to allow them to render not only smells, but also temperatures without having to expend any additional energy. And this applies not only to VR contexts, but also mobile and AR contexts. Finally, while it's a promising illusion, we're pretty keen on exploring how we can expand this temperature illusion beyond the nose, and that might actually offer richer temperature experiences for virtual reality. So I'd want to acknowledge my co-authors again, Stephen Noggles and my advisor, Pedro Lopes. And thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions at this point, though I don't really know where to look for the questions. I'll assume Ben's going to say something. Sorry.
Yes, thanks, Jess. That was a very cool talk. That's the first time I've seen that talk. I still had to run down to your lab at some point and strap one of these things on. This will be awesome. Yeah, so we already have some questions coming in. If you have questions, please, click on the participants tab and then do, raise your hand or use one of those icons to indicate that you have a question, and then we'll unmute you to so that you can ask your question. We already have a few questions coming in, so I'm going to try to get to those first. So Jazz, well, I think you're going to have a lot of questions, but all right. So first question from actually YouTube. One common complaint of VR is that headsets get hot and sweaty. The technology is fascinating and more immersion is always a good goal, but do consumers actually want to experience more heat in VR?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I think it depends on the situation. I think there's something very interesting about like thermal realism, and especially this kind of illusion, because you might not always have like a strong reaction is might be like the nice thing about this, not necessarily always sweating. And I think a lot of the participants that actually did the VR one responded quite positively, especially for the cool sensations in virtual reality. And in the paper, I think it brings this up. They all rated like enjoying it more with that cooling sensation. I think most people are like not like, it's conflicting whether they enjoy being like warmed up. I'm personally someone who enjoys being cool most of the time. So I don't know if that answers that question very well.
Excellent. Yeah, we're gonna have to, go through these. Okay, we have a question from Roshan, who's active on the Zoom. Roshan, I believe I've unmuted you. Please feel free to jump in with your question.
Hi, Jess. It's really great work. I was just typing in my question as well, but yeah, I think one of the other advantages of this work is that it's also a contactless way to deliver thermal sensations, which is quite difficult with if you have Peltier modules and such. So I was just wondering, like, did the participants feel any of these delivery mechanisms, like a bit of wind or like kind of droplets on the nose, because the nose is kind of the most sensitive part?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So when we were adjusting the quantities that were being emitted, if it was too much, so this is like in the earlier kind of like pilots, if there's a lot of atomization happening, they'll actually feel a wetness or the atomization itself. But if you regulate it to about the quantities that we had in the paper, they don't feel it. And you can even lower it even more where they don't. It feels kind of like sudden changes. So that tactile aspect can disappear.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Roshan. A question from Sarah Sibo. You show examples where the different compounds to simulate feelings, hot and cold, are given in quick succession when turning on the emergency power box. How long do the effects of each of the compounds last? And can the quick switching be influenced by any carryover effects from the compounds with contrasting effects?
That's a fantastic question, and one that's still on my mind right now. So we didn't actually investigate kind of like how quickly switches can happen. You can notice them pretty fast just from like anecdotal experience. I think one of the concerns is generally just that you're actuating these channels separately compared to like warming or cooling the skin progressively, where it's like you can do weird things like actuate both the TRPM8 channel and the TRPV1, which is both hot and cold, and have like a really weird reaction to it. Not necessarily thermal grill-esque. But to answer that question more directly, I think we'll have to look at that more in future work. It's in the case of the VR environment, we specifically made it a longer experience so that people can like focus on it more. I think we ended up having it be like a minimum of 2 minutes, but the sensation faded away pretty quickly afterwards. I hope that answers the question completely.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so there are still more questions coming in. I suspect that Jazz will have to field quite a few of these, either online in the Zoom chats or via email. Either way is fine. But let's just take one more before we move on to Andrew. From Udai, let's see, what is he here? I'm sure he is. I need to scroll down this long list of participants and unmute him. I'll just read his question and then he can follow up as he's unmuted now. Let's see, how does room temperature affect this illusion? For example, when a user is in the room temperature of say 30 degrees Celsius, does the cold temperature illusion still work?
Yeah, so we had the same thought. So straight up on the virtual reality and in both of our user studies, we actually maintain the same room temperature just so that there's no effects on this. In previous literature about this, there is interactions between the room temperature itself and the perception of these compounds, in the sense that you can have weird things like capsaicin modulating your ability to perceive like room temperature a bit differently. And it's not as straightforward as controlling like the air temperature, the relationship between like the air temperature and the skin temperature. That's like something that I'm interested in exploring in the future. But yeah, it's not as straightforward as kind of like as just changing the temperature of a tissue. That's an excellent question.
All right, thank you so much, Jess, for that great talk. I think there will be more. There are still already more questions that we didn't even get to. But I think you can see those questions already in chat. I think Rob Mitchum is helping us move over questions from the YouTube channel as he's monitoring that. So yeah, feel free to answer those on the chat channel or do so privately. Either way would be fine. In the meantime, we're going to move to our second talk. Let me get all the information here. Thanks, Jess. So our second talk is from Andrew McNutt, and he is a PhD student also here at UChicago, working with Gordon on visualization-related topics. So let me post his info there. Andrew, I believe you're unmuted and ready to go.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
Okay. No problem. Take it away.
All right. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Everyone see my title slide? Cool. Sorry, little Zoom clutter. Hi, my name is Andrew McNutt. I'm a third-year PhD student here at University of Chicago. When reading a visualization, is what we see really what we get? There are a lot of ways that visualizations can mislead us to appear to show us something interesting that disappears upon closer inspection. Today, I'm going to be talking about our paper, Surfacing Visualization Mirages, in which we introduce the notion of a visualization mirage, describe the troubles they can cause, and provide a technique based on metamorphic testing to dispel a particularly quarrelsome class of mirages. This work was the product of a collaboration between me and Gordon Kittleman and Michael Correll during my summer internship at Tableau Research. So what can we say about this humble bar chart? Well, it appears that location B has about 50% more sales than location A. Is the store in location A underperforming? Given the magnitude of the difference, I bet your knee-jerk answer would be yes. Yet, the reality of the situation can be much more complex. Many patterns can hide behind aggregate data. It might have outliers. It might have dirty data. It might have irregular population sizes, or just a whole host of additional problems. Simple aggregations like our humble bar chart are the foundation of many analytics tools, with subsequent analyses often being built on top of these potentially shaky grounds. As we'll discuss, problems like this are endemic to visual analysis, occurring at each stage in the analysis pipeline. What do we do about these problems? Should we stop analyzing data visually? Should we burn our computers? Well, the first step in addressing a problem is to often name it. So we introduce a term for these errors: visualization mirages. We define them to be any visualization where the cursory reading of the visualization would appear to support a particular message arising from the data, but where a closer re-examination would remove or cast significant doubt on the support. We conducted a literature review that yielded 83 different errors, and despite the magnitude of this list, it's not comprehensive. Mirages come from all sorts of places. Mirages arise through visual analytics. They occur as the result of choices made about data. They come from design choices. They depend on what you're trying to do with data or trying to do with visualizations from everywhere. These can come in familiar forms like the outliers shown here, or from overplotting, or the easily recalled availability heuristic, or as well as less familiar ones, such as inappropriate or missing aggregation. For the full details of this list, please see the appendix of our paper. So on the road to making a visualization or chart, there are many steps and stages, each of which are liable to let error in. Consider a simplified pipeline model. An analyst decides how to curate data, how to wrangle it into a usable form, how to visually encode that data, and then finally, how to actually read it. At each moment, when the analyst exercises agency, they create an opportunity for error, and therein a mirage, which can cascade along this pipeline, creating illusory insights. Let's look at a few concrete examples of where things have gone wrong. Mirages can come from dirty data due to statistical or data entry errors or lots of other places. Something as innocuous as defining the bins of a histogram or other bar chart can mask underlying data quality issues, which might in turn lead to incorrect inferences about a trend. For instance, here it appears that sales are down in the fourth quarter of 2010, yet on closer inspection, we can see that there are several months of missing data driving that insight. Mirages can come from volatile visualizations. That is, those visualizations or charts that don't really reflect changes to their data, or can cause the reader to hallucinate meaning through arbitrary graphical decisions. For instance, arbitrary choices about axis ordering in a radar chart can cause a reader to falsely believe one job candidate is good, while another is lacking. To wit, which of these candidates is better? Answer, neither. They are the same candidate, that only the axis ordering has been changed. Mirages can come from creating visualizations with uncritical or unreflective eye. For instance, decisions about what type of crime actually counts as crime can lead to maps that drive radically different impressions about the role of crime in a particular area. As here, home buying website Trulia gives a radically different depiction of which parts of New York are dangerous compared to a similar map highlighting white-collar crime. So now maybe you're asking yourself, do these mirages really happen? Do they occur in day-to-day life? To motivate this, let's consider a hypothetical analysis session. Say you're curious about the trend of global energy usage over time. A natural way to address these questions would be to fire up Tableau and drop in the World Indicators dataset. The World Indicators dataset consists of various vital world statistics from 2000 to 2012. It's been used for advocacy of lots of different sorts, as well as to understand just the general trajectory of human development. So we can start by visualizing our data as a simple line chart. The trend over time here shows that there was a sharp decrease in 2012. Great, job done. And this would be great news for the environment were it not illusory, as we can see on the right when we actually go to check the set of missing records. Now, if we try to quash these data problems by switching the aggregation in our line chart from sum to mean, we find that the opposite is true. There is a sharp increase from 2000, and there's a sharp increase in 2012. Unfortunately, this conclusion is also a mirage. The only non-null entries for 2012 are OECD countries. These countries have much higher energy usage than other countries across all of these years. Now, given these irregularities, we can try removing 2012 from the data and focus on the gradual upward trend in energy usage in the rest of the data. As you can see on the left, it appears that energy usage is tightly correlated with average life expectancy. Perhaps more power means a happier life for everyone after all. Seems great. Unfortunately, this too is a mirage. The y-axis of this chart has been altered to make the trends appear similar and obscures the fact that energy usage is flat for most countries, with 2 notable outliers. Now, of course, after seeing that, you're probably saying, I'm very smart and visually literate, and I wouldn't fall for these mirages. Unfortunately, even those with high data visualization literacy make mistakes, such as the case with this now infamous chart of gun deaths in Florida, which upon first glance appears to show that the stand your ground law actually decreased gun deaths. But on second glance, it actually says the opposite. Gun deaths increased after the stand your ground law. The axis is pointed in the opposite direction from the conventional direction. This is another mirage. There are lots of ways you might be deceived. For instance, visualizations are rhetorical devices that are easy to trust too deeply, which can cause the reader to miss subtleties or to accept questionable conclusions unquestioningly. Sometimes you're just tired and you missed something obvious. So instead of relying on the user to do everything for themselves, we turn to computers for help. Alerting users to mirages is a great way to guide them towards safer visual analytics. Some mirages, like the reversed axes we saw on the previous slide, are easy to detect. You simply query the function creating the visualization directly. Yet, not all problems are so easy to find. Many chart types do not have ready-made guidelines or best practices to guide analysts. Mirages that lie at the intersection of visual encoding and data wrangling stages of our pipeline are much harder to detect. To address this, we turn to metamorphic testing, which is a testing methodology from software engineering that begins with the observation that you can't always test for the correctness of properties directly. That is, test oracles are not always available. In some of these cases, it can be easier to reason about correctness in relationship to changes, that is, over symmetries. Let's put it graphically. This technique begins by finding an example of normal behavior, here labeled example data, messing up that input data in a careful and predetermined way, yielding the modified data, and then feeding it through the system of interest, and finally comparing the old and new outputs, which yields a binary pass-fail result. It is a test after all. So let's make this concrete. One of my favorite examples of this technique is Donaldson et al.'s graphics fuzz, a metamorphic testing technique for compilers of shader programs, which are a special type of program for creating computer graphics. They start by taking a working shader, as here on the left, and injecting hypothetically dead code into that shader, and then automatically comparing the outputs. And this injection of hypothetically dead code should hypothetically do nothing. But as we can see in these cases, it radically modifies the output. Through this technique, they're able to catch a number of bugs in commercial shader compilers. Pretty good. We can start to apply this model to visualization problems by recalling Kindelman-Scheidegger's algebraic visualization design framework, which asserts, in the language of category theory, a good visualization will change significantly when significant changes to its inputs are made. Similarly, when an insignificant change is made, then there should be, correspondingly, no visual change. And pleasantly, this turns out to be exactly isomorphic to Donaldson et al.'s formulation of metamorphic testing, as shown here on the bottom. And we can combine these into a metamorphic testing for visualization, here written graphically, as well as in pseudo-Haskell. We note that these assertions are parameterized by the way the data is changed, here denoted alpha, the way that the output is modified, denoted omega, and the way that they're compared, EQ for equality. We believe this technique would be effective when used in conjunction with other methods, such as data verification, direct viz verification, and of course, healthy skepticism. To test the validity of this technique, we built a proof of concept system that applied metamorphic testing for visualization to a simple static subset of the VegaLite charting library. VegaLite is a charting library that implements the grammar of graphics through a static and machine-friendly API. This makes it easier for our system to automatically reason about our metamorphic assertions. Now let's see this technique in action. So the order in which you draw dots in a scatterplot shouldn't matter, right? Yet, depending on the data set, it often can. Overplotting data classes or overplotting can erase data classes or can cause false inferences. So we can test for this property by shuffling the order of the input data and then doing a pixel difference between the two images. If the difference is above a certain threshold, we know that there may be a problem. This is the essence of our technique. For a particular data set, execute a change that should have a predictable result in this case, that there should be no visual change, and compare the results. We can also test via visual changes. For instance, here we expect that if we change the opacity of bars in a bar chart, then we should get roughly the same chart with slightly opaque bars, right? That seems reasonable. Yet, in this case, this assertion fails, revealing a problem. In particular, it reveals that one of the authors, me, of this paper forgot to select an aggregation function. And so all of the bars were simply drawn on top of each other, doing an implicit max aggregation. While this is a fine chart if chosen explicitly, the ambiguity here will likely create a mirage. Testing through data manipulation can be made more effective in some scenarios by taking a statistical view. For instance, here we're investigating whether the insight displayed in our bar chart from the top of the talk is robust. To answer this question, we can bootstrap within our data classes. That is, we can non-parametrically recreate the subset of the data within each mark by sampling with replacement. This will allow us to see if the aggregation ordering is robust. We'll consider two examples. First, we'll look at case A, which looks at the simple case where the marks are each driven by a single point. Okay, so let's execute our bootstraps. Executing the bootstrap, we find that no matter how many resamplings we run, again, because there's only one element per bar, we always find that the bars have the same ordinal relationship. That is, A is always less than B. This suggests that this insight is robust. No test failure. Now let's turn to a second example, case B, where the aggregation here is predominantly driven by an outlier, and then we can now apply our same bootstrapping logic to see if it's robust. And behold, we see the bootstrapping within the marks shows that the insight only held up about 2/3 of the time. This qualifies for us as an assertion failure. This doesn't seem to be a good basis on which to make subsequent decisions. While still in early development, we find that this approach can effectively catch a wide variety of visualization errors that occur when matching encoding to data. The full space of visualization mirages is vast and covers complex ground like critical reasoning, cognitive biases, and inequality. There are some mirages that may never be amenable to testing or verification, especially not in as straightforward a way as issues driven by outliers or sampling error. Visualizations and the people who create them are prone to failure in subtle and difficult ways. We believe that visual analytics systems should do more to protect their users from themselves. We believe that these systems should help their users have justified and accurate confidence in their conclusions. One way these systems can do this is to surface visualization mirages to their users as part of the analytics process, which hopefully will guide users towards a safer and more effective analysis. Applying our metamorphic testing for visualization approach is just one tool in the visualization validation toolbox, though of course there are others, such as direct validating charting specifications. The right interface to effectively convey validations is still unknown. Applying a metaphor of software linting seems like a promising approach. With that, I'll conclude my talk. I'll be happy to take any questions here or on the chat or even more likely probably on the internet. Thanks to Tableau Research for funding this work, and thanks to you for your time and attention.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. That was a very interesting talk. So yes, Zoom clapping. I don't know how that works yet. I'm still trying to figure out the icons. But Zoom applause. So thank you for that talk. Let's see, we have a couple of minutes for questions. Trying to sort through, see if we have any on Zoom yet. If you do have a question or would like to ask a question, please use the hands up button on your Zoom participants panel. And I am trying to scan it. In the meantime, while I'm trying to sort that out, Andrew, I have a question as I was listening to your talk. It seems like some of these problems are more of sort of like a data processing and pre-processing, data cleaning sort of issue. Is there a fine line or is there a clear line that delineates between, issues in data processing and just missing data versus actual visualization things? I think some of the examples that you talked about were very clearly visualization things like overlapping bars or upside down axes and mislabeled issues like that. Is there a clear line between those? And also, if you were to apply a general technique that accounts for some of these, but not all of these, how do you sort of make it clear that where the line or where the scope of your tool sort of ends?
Those are two wonderful questions. So a kind of crucial thing about the act of visualization is that it kind of is a holistic process. There are, like you say, there are parts. There's visual encoding, and there's also data preprocessing. And when you're taking that action, you are making assumptions and you're making decisions across this process. And sort of, while there are sort of, these kind of clearly defined subfields like wrangling or encoding, what's more insidious is when these kind of co-occur. Like the language of AVD or algebraic viz is useful because it allows us to talk about the relationship sort of between the data state, or like the nature of the data that you have, and the way that you're encoding it. So there's not really a clear line, and the reason why we're applying AVD is to try to hopefully sort of deal with that blurred line. And then how do you communicate the boundaries of your analysis? That is incredibly hard. I don't know if there's a known solution yet. There's a paper at Euroviz that's getting presented tomorrow, actually, on visual lint by Hopkins and Co. And they cover some mechanisms for doing a visual lint on top of a chart to tell users have done stuff wrong. But it's not clear how that works. I mean, the way trust works is with visualization is very delicate. Like if you reveal to someone that there's been an error, sometimes they'll just stop trusting your whole system or even just the visualization in total. And that sort of recoil can be really bad if you're trying to help someone do an analysis. So it's a tough question.
Yeah, definitely. That's clearly, there's no easy answer to that one. So one of the comments on Zoom chat from Maribel, this is a great validation tool, but I find it more useful for checking others' work, for example, charts presented by the media and other organizations rather than when you are the author. I guess the sort of the implied question here is, how is there a difference between when you are using this tool on external data versus your own? Is there an easier way to apply this to, for example, external sources of data? I think that would be super cool if you were to have some sort of a filter where, when presented with a particular chart or information source, whether it be on some sort of web page or in a paper, that you could automatically run this tool. You could, apply sort of the techniques that you talked about and really point out potentially misleading types of issues.
Yeah, totally. I would really love to see more tools engage with like reproducibility and replicability. And I think having a validation process like this would be a great way to do that. It's hard to do that via the internet because you don't know what data processes the person did ahead of time. Like you don't know what assumptions they made when they're curating their data. Like returning to the crime maps example, you don't know what assumptions they made when they were saying like, oh, this is a crime versus this is not. And those sorts of artifacts would be hard to audit or even really think about. And so, that process, it's unclear if this would even be addressable through our validation process either. Ours is a modest and early stage prototype. We're trying to just open up this sort of automatic perturbations of data in a new way.
Yeah, I mean, just a comment on that. I think this is something that could be potentially incredibly useful and of high impact if there were some version of that were to be easily applied for external sources, right? In this day and age of sort of misrepresenting data and like as the example that you showed of the Florida crime results, I mean, that would potentially have a huge amount of impact, I think, in non-academic research life. And that could be super interesting. Okay, all right. Thank you, Andrew, for that great talk. I think there might be more questions on YouTube and chat as we go along. In the meantime, it is time for us to move to our third talk. And this will be given by Pedro. So here you go. That's Pedro's information. on the paper as well. Pedro, I probably don't need to say much other than he's one of our young stars here in HCI, and every time I hear about his work, it's simultaneously exciting and just a tad frightening. So super exciting stuff. Pedro, I'll let you take over.
All right, can you all see my screen and hear me? Yeah? I don't see anyone, so I need a verbal acknowledgement.
Yeah, you're good to go.
All right, awesome. All right, so I'll be talking about this reflection paper that I wrote with this group of people that you see here on the slide. These are my co-authors. Too many to name, but they're all amazing people. And we essentially wrote a reflection paper about a paradigm shift in the thinking of interfaces. We think people are, especially researchers in human-computer interaction, are used to thinking about HCI as the study of the interaction between humans and computers. And this perspective of taking the I in HCI as interaction is interesting, but it does come with one cost, which is that it makes us consider users and devices as two separate entities, which I represent here as the user and the device, as these two bubbles. The separation has proven very valuable since the early days of like mainframe computers and interactive computers. In fact, it's what allowed us to move from mainframe computers to actual interactive personal computers by improving the interaction between the user and device, right? This little boundary right there, this frontier between these two bubbles, by optimizing the user device's bandwidth, the ergonomics, and so forth. And so when people tried to start to make these interactions happen everywhere and any time, we all know what happened, right? The form factors shifted, devices became smaller than the users, and that led to mobile devices, essentially putting a device in everyone's pockets. This also fueled a lot of new challenges, such as usability challenges, how to interact with touch modality, how to interact in very small screens, and so forth. But pretty much ended up with us here today in 2020 with a device in everyone's pocket. Now, what's really interesting is that this trend didn't stop right here, but it continued and moved the devices from our pockets into our user's body and in the forms of wearable devices, which, as we know, can be attached to our own body or even embedded into our clothes. And this, again, brought new challenges. How do we interact without looking at the device, so-called eyes-free, in really quick gestures, and so forth. Now, this way of thinking of the letter I in HCI as interaction is very powerful, and I think it draws on the definition of the word itself, communication with something or someone. And that's precisely what we as researchers sort of are optimizing for. We're optimizing for the communication of this between the interface and the user, the speed of this communication, the bandwidth of the communication, and so forth. But today I want to emphasize that there's also a new paradigm, interface paradigm in the horizon just after wearable, and that these devices overlap with the human body to a much larger degree than ever before. And let me exemplify with something that is very close to my own research and to my heart. These are interactive devices based on muscle stimulation. So these have the capability to move the user's muscles involuntarily. As such, one can, for instance, put these electrodes on one's arm and control your muscles, as in transforming your muscles into a display by controlling how you sketch via these involuntary contractions driven by the muscle stimulation. Now, what is really striking here is that the user's muscles became an integral part of the hardware of the device. And that's why we say there's a large overlap between users and device. As a result of this, I think, and my co-authors agree too, that it will be very productive to also think of the letter I in HCI, not just of interaction, but also as of integration. And that this paradigm shift is not just limited to devices that overlap with the user's senses or user's muscles, but even with implanted devices. Right? These are devices that are completely inside the user's body, usually medical devices such as pacemakers, RFIDs, but also see that this is bleeding into the interactive devices area. So we think this perspective of integration is very useful to explore the challenges that arise if you consider user and device as one entity. And we'll see that we actually found out precisely a few challenges that arise from that. So that's what we did. We immersed 29 researchers in 5 days in the castle in Germany called Dachstuhl, which is really cool, and I recommend you all to go there, to discuss these grand challenges that come with the concept of integration. We wanted to find out which issues are exacerbated by looking at HCI from the lens of integration rather than interaction, and we clustered these issues in what we thought were grand challenges for the field. These were organized in 4 categories, such as human-compatible technology, identity and behavior, integration with society, and designing for integrated interfaces. Now, I can't go into all of them because this format doesn't allow me to dive into every single one in detail. So let me highlight two that I think are very relevant for devices that are very close to the human body. Let me start with biocompatibility. So we're departing from rigid wearable devices that just sit loosely on your skin, and we're diving directly into sticking or attaching devices such as films, electrodes, and so forth, directly into the user's epidermis. What really sets epidermal devices apart from wearables is that they're made to adapt to the user's body shape. And so researchers engineer them using flexible and stretchable materials. Now, sometimes part of the research devices might accomplish this, and here's some of mine on the right side, in fact, but still hide away pieces of electronics that are ultimately comprised of non-stretchable or non-conformable materials. The reason why we thought it's a grand challenge rather than ordinary challenge is that we just don't mean to conform the sensors or the actuators to the body, as is the case here, but to go one step further and conform the complete device to the user's body. And we're start seeing a new range of approaches to this, such as making the devices without a rigid PCB on the left side, or even using stretchable transistors on the right side, actually from Shan-Yuan from Chicago. Now, the next type of devices that I'm talking about are placed under the user's epidermis, and therefore are literally under your skin. These are fingertip magnets, RFID implants, and even some interactive devices. And then last, as you move past the skin and into the fat and the tissue, you have truly implanted devices, such as cochlear implants, insulin pumps, and pacemakers. Now, if you look at each of the layers of these stacks, you can identify key challenges for HCI if you think of this lens of integration. So first, devices that are attached to the skin do not require any surgery or complex procedure because they're based on stickers, like the sticky electrodes that I use for muscle stimulation. On the contrary, this means these stickers obstruct your skin. They interfere heavily with your tactile acuity. They diminish your sense of dexterity. And of course, they're not permanent, so researchers keep reapplying them. And this is a key limitation because while these devices are the safest on this list, they only have applications in research right now, where the others actually have commercial deployments. And I find that very, very challenging and interesting. Now, subdermal devices are of a different class. They require small surgical procedures to go under your epidermis. And you can apply permanently simple actuators such as magnets, RFIDs. But as they grow in complexity, such as the device on the right side, which has batteries and LEDs, it's a device by Team Canon, you start to see some of the open challenges. How do you upgrade this device? How do you communicate without cables and open wounds and so forth? And lastly, in the deeper level of implantation, such as pacemakers and so forth, you inherit all the challenges of subdermal devices with an extra level of critical care and need, right? That's biocompatibility of the materials to avoid rejection and the need for serious surgery. They, of course, have the benefits, right? Lifelong permanence, access to organs, and not just the sensory apparatus. That's how a pacemaker regulates your heart function. And they usually don't need any explicit user involvement. These devices just do their thing automatically. So while these are certainly implanted devices, they might not really be interactive implanted devices, as they don't expose an interface for the user to control them. So there's very little agency in having one of these devices. So it's a key open challenge how you might allow your users, or you might design ways for your users to actually control or interact or understand what's going on with these devices. Now, I've talked about challenges down at sort of the intersection of hardware, users' biology, skin, and so forth. But how might these new integrated devices affect users' identity and behavior? So the big open question here is, if you're integrated with a device to a point that, as I just said, maybe it sits inside your body and it's accessed through a very direct means, such as muscle movements and so forth, what does this do to your sense of self? In other words, if there's an interface paradigm shift towards this concept of integration, is there also a shift in perception of self? And technologies for changing one's perception of self are certainly out there. In fact, virtual reality has been a rather popular means to achieve many of these illusions, such as to shift one's perspective into that of a child with a smaller body by using virtual avatars. And certainly it's also possible to do this outside of VR too. Here's a user that sees from a viewpoint of a camera attached to their waist, and as my postdoc Jun Nishida found out, users not only see from that height of a child, but their behavior is somewhat transformed into childlike behavior too. These devices do all of this by only tricking our optical sense. But as this integration moves from the user's senses into the user's actuators, like their muscles, self-perception might change even more because we can now also manipulate self-action. Let me give an example. In one of my early projects using muscle stimulation, I created a variation of a popular children's game called Red Hands or Slapsies. Two people have to sort of slap each other's hands and one has to tuck away really fast. But here you play alone, in which case your voluntary hand is trying to avoid being slapped by your involuntary hand. That involuntary hand is controlled by means of muscle stimulation. It's not under your control. When participants tried this out, they reported a sense of blurred ownership, sometimes referring to their computer-controlled hand as part of their body, and sometimes to an external interactive device that they just played a game with. And this is even more evident as we start to give users abilities beyond their biological capacity. For instance, here in this project, Last Kai, we used muscle stimulation to accelerate someone's reaction time so much that they were able to take a picture of this very fast-moving baseball by means of the muscle stimulation doing the picture for them. And so this is kind of an interesting case because our intuition would tell us that the sense of agency, the feeling of I did this, is totally immutable. And so when I voluntarily do an action, I feel all my agency. But if I'm assisted by muscle stimulation to do an action faster than humanly possible, especially than my own humanly possible, I should feel no agency. But our findings were quite different. In fact, what we found out in this study, Last Kai, is that users actually felt completely in control of actions that they only performed faster by means of muscle stimulation. In fact, there are many other interesting devices out there that have a capability of doing actions for the user or with the user, such as extra limbs that hold tools for you, or muscle stimulation that makes you operate a tool that you've never seen before, or a tail that automatically balances your body. Now, these exhibits varying levels of agency, from user-driven things to mixed initiative, such as things that might make you feel like I did this, or something that is more mixed initiative that might feel like this helped me to do it. And we think this is a really grand open challenge for devices that have the ability to control the user's body. How will you as a designer create tools that have this feeling and this permeable feeling of user and device agents? How will you even regulate this user and device agency, and how you ensure that the user is always in control? Now, what is striking about the perception of self is that it's also influenced by how others see us. And as such, there's another open challenge here to examine the perception of integrated devices on others, right? Not just on myself. For example, how will others perceive you if you have this interactive tail that our co-author Dog made, right? And in fact, some researchers such as Christian Holtz and his colleagues have explicitly looked at how users of mock-up implanted devices felt as they walked around with the devices around bystanders. And this is a real key challenge to deepen our understanding of the future of these devices, not just to look at the user, but also at the other users around them. So let me summarize what this paper is trying to do. We're trying to present grand challenges that we derive by looking at HCI as integration rather than interaction. And we cluster these in 4 categories that you can see right here, such as human-compatible technology, identity and behavior, integration in society, where we dive into a lot of the ethical challenges, and designing for integrated interfaces, where we dive into a lot of how you transmit information between user and device if you can't use, for instance, visuals. Now, I did not go into all of them. I want to emphasize this is sort of the type of paper that is just meant to be read and dissected and disagreed with. As a paper co-authored by 26 people, I guarantee you, I also don't agree with all the perspectives in it. And we really meant this paper as a conversation starter. Now, if you find yourself saying HCI by meaning something else than our existing HCI acronym, and you're getting confused between integration and interaction, don't worry. We're not trying to overload this very useful term that we already have. In fact, most of the co-authors in this paper refer to human-computer integration as HINT rather than HCI. Now, of course, some of us, like myself, went all the way with it when I decided to call my HCI lab the Human-Computer Integration Lab. And so we're also just trying to provoke more researchers to consider what perspective they're taking at every moment when they're doing their research, and that perhaps sometimes considering users and devices as one integrated entity might give them new challenges and new ideas to work on. Now, lastly, I want to thank all my amazing co-authors. There are too many to name, but you can see their names right here on this slide, with a special thanks to Floyd, Jonathan Gruden, and Patty Maas, who really brought us together to write this paper after our initial doctoral meeting. With this, I'm here. I'd love to take your questions. If we're running too much out of time, as Ben said, you can also type them in the chat box, and I'll just go at it.
Great. Thank you, Pedro. That was a pretty cool talk. So I think we can go over a little bit our original schedule. it's one of these things where, our second session, I believe, has one fewer talk, so we have a little bit of leeway here. So let's see. I think Sarah has a question. Sarah?
Yeah, I had a quick question about how you think about devices that have a lot of agency themselves, like robots or interactive bots or virtual agents, and how much of those might have a play with the human-computer integration as opposed to the interaction, and whether you think those type of devices or agents will stay more in the interaction side, or whether you think that they can also integrate with the human body.
An awesome question, and the HRI angle had to come from you. That's very, very cool. So that's actually one funny one, and reading the paper will give you a different answer, or asking any of my 25 co-authors will give you a different answer, probably 25 different answers. And this is where I disagree with some of us, and I disagree with our paper, which is I actually find there's some necessity for me to call something integration that it is indistinguishable from a part of the human body. And so if the device is not using part of your body, I don't think it's really integrated, at least with you. It might be integrated with society, with the environment, and so forth. And so for me, in my part of the paper, essentially, I kind of would claim that necessity to be in the body is a prerequisite for the integration. And as such, robots, unless exoskeletons and so forth, they're not integrated. That being said, many of my co-authors disagreed with me, and they actually called precisely these robotic accompaniments and companion species that just work with you and have a lot of agency, and sometimes mixed agency too, because they won't do it without your initiative and so forth. They call them integrated interfaces. So I think it's up for debate what this actually is. From my perspective, we kind of require that bodily function to be integrated. This is a really good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Dan Bennett had a question. I unmuted Dan. Dan, you want to just go ahead and ask? Oh, sorry. Maybe I didn't unmute him correctly, but I'm trying to.
That's great. Hi there. Really, really love the talk, and I'm really particularly interested in the stuff you've been doing in this and a few other papers, thinking about agency in integration. And one thing I always think about when agency comes up in HCI is that we talk a lot about kind of, and I think your work generally focuses on this too, this kind of sense of control, the feeling of having controlled a process. I just wondered whether there's anything in the paper, I've not had a chance to look yet, and a distinction to be drawn between this sense of control, agency, and a broader sense of autonomy, sort of the sense of self-governance, because quite a lot of the issues we have now around, say, dark patterns and things are more issues of self-governance, and obviously they potentially become more concerning when perhaps even via the sense of self-control being overridden is a bit of a funny word there, but that's perhaps a vector for more of those issues.
Yeah, Dan, I'm 100% with you on that one, because you're right. And I think precisely the reason why in my papers I try to use the sense of agency, in fact, I use two things and try to distinguish them too. Sense of agency and the sense of ownership, right? These are very different things as well. I might feel agency of something, but I might feel, or have agency over something, but I might not feel that that's part of my body. And that happens a lot with these integrated devices, is that some score really well on agency and they score terribly on ownership and sense of feeling they're actually integrated as part of my body. They come with me and they respond when I want, and others the other way around. But then to top the whole thing off, you're totally right. And that's, I think, why we ended up not using sense of governing. And we do talk about a little bit of that in the ethical section part of the paper when we discuss how these devices might be used in sort of dark patterns of integration. And then we don't mean agency. We mean exactly the same as you mean with sense of governance. And I think that is above all of it. And that's regardless of whether it's just an interface that you've integrated with or that you're interacting with, or one that controls you and so forth, so forth. I think you're on point. And in fact, later on today, I mean, Marshini's going to chair one of the sessions, and she knows tons about that. And she, in fact, authored a couple of papers on dark patterns. So if you can stick in the line, you might hear more from her on that note. This is a great question.
Great, thank you. So I think we probably have to move on, but let's take in one last question from Rain Ashford. Rain, you want to ask? I think you're unmuted.
Yeah, I think you've unmuted me. Hi, Pedro. Hey, fantastic talk. Yes, nice to see you again. My research is around like nonverbal communication and personalization of wearable devices, and I just wondered how personalization, i.e. self-expression through aesthetic choices, could or might be developed when any early devices would probably be confined to a certain set of materials, for example, interface choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're striking a perfect point right there, because a huge section of this paper, and in fact the one that starts this biocompatibility discussion that I presented here, but I chopped off in the interest of time, starts with personalization. Who wrote that is Martin Weigel, in case you want to reach out to Martin and just get really geeky with him on this. But what Martin is arguing in that section of the paper is essentially that personalization of wearable devices is almost like mandatory step to get to an integrated device, right? First of all, bodies are all different. There's no one size fit all and so forth. And then I think, maybe I'm speaking too much for Martin, but I think what Martin is saying as well is that ultimately it's almost like only the user can customize the device for their own body. We're going to reach like a little weird point down the line of personalization that nobody can personalize but you. And that's a really interesting step, which then also gets into your topic, which is, okay, and if I designed a transfer of information, especially if it's nonverbal, there might be points as well where the user kicks in again and says, like, let me customize how this device is going to talk to my muscles, to my body, to my sense of auditory, to my sense of this and that. And so I think personalization is going to play a huge role, and it's really a field out for grabs for new papers and new developments in HCI, honestly.
Cool. Thank you very much. Can't wait to read the paper.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. So that concludes the first session of our symposium today. So let's see. I'm sure Blaise is here. Pedro, should we just transition straight into session two? I
just made Blaise the host. Blaise?
Right, yeah. So let's
all right, Blaise, take it away.
To session two. Great. So hi everyone. I am Blaise. I am faculty here at UChicago. And actually, of all the session chairs, I'm now the longest tenured person at UChicago. So I'm a faculty for a bit over 3 years. Right. And so up next, we have Andrew McNutt coming back to present another talk. And so Andrew, please feel free to go ahead and share your screen as I'm introducing you. So Andrew, already been introduced. This time he's presenting Divining Insights, Visual Analytics through Cartomancy. So this paper is part of the proceedings of the Alt-Chi subconference, which is a venue for boundary pushing, intentionally provocative, and really fun work. All right, and so Andrew, why don't you just take it away?
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Blaise. Hi again. Like Blaise said, my name is Andrew McNutt. I'm a third-year PhD student here at UChicago. So our interactions with data are increasingly shaped by automated systems. An open question is how to give analysts the tools to interpret these automatic insights while also inculcating critical engagement with algorithmic analysis. Can you really trust what automation has wrought? What can be learned and gained by ceding agency to the hands of the divine? I'm here to talk about our recent Alt-Chi paper, Divining Insights, Visual Analytics through Cartomancy. This work is a collaboration between me and Tableau researchers Anne-Marie Cryan and Michael Carell. In this talk, we'll answer these questions and more. But before we get started, I wanted to expand on Blaise's definition a little bit. This is a somewhat strange line of work, as I'm sure you can tell. And given that you heard and will be hearing more traditional types of talks today, I want to make sure you understand the context of it. As Blaise said, it's from a subconference of Chi called Alt-Chi. Alt-Chi is a medium for controversial or boundary-pushing papers that are sometimes fun, funny, or insightful, or serious, or weird, or lots of other things. For instance, the other side from a year or two ago commented on the black box nature of deep learning systems by conducting a seance right there at Alt-Chi, while Lickable Cities commented on HCI methodologies through absurdity. Some works are important and might not have found a home or an audience without Alt-Chi, such as this year's I'm Just Terrified of My Future, which in a series of unflinching first-person narratives describes violences people with disabilities face in academia. I describe these papers both because they're wonderful, and but also because I want to highlight the importance of having a venue for critical but sometimes playful work within a major academic venue. These comments and thoughts are important and should not be removed from the academic project by deplatforming. In particular, I desire that my own field, Viz, engage more deeply in self-reflection, which might be well mediated by something like an alt-Viz at our big conference, Viz. Anyway, with this context in mind, we now may begin with a problem. People oftentimes find themselves in situations where they have data and they want insights, but they don't know how to bridge that gap. As good computer scientists, we can simply call on data visualization to save the day. Charts, visual analytics, graphs, perception, and more. And that should be the end of the story, right? Unfortunately, visual analysis is hard. It can require expertise to create effective charts, to transform and manipulate data, to do all the things that you must do as part of the analysis process to understand data effectively. Automated recommendation systems, which are a growing area of research, are an enticing way to get around these problems. Open up some software, drop in your data, get the insights you so desperately seek. These tools have begun to pop up in the likes of Tableau, to Google Sheets, and really just everywhere in between. But there's a problem with this approach as well. Effective automated analysis poses a challenging set of problems and requires you to be on your guard in new, familiar ways. In particular, these systems are often opaque black boxes that make uninterpretable predictions. Why did this chart get chosen over another? While there is opacity in the action of seeding agency, the problem is possibly even worse as more analysis systems turns towards deep learning techniques, where the very idea of interpretability is ambiguous. These analysis systems can be inflexible to the needs of the domain the analyst is working in, providing general advice that might be irrelevant locally, or might arbitrarily promote particular charts due to arbitrary limitations in their implementation. The conclusions they promote can be brittle, crafted as they are by effectively evaluating every parameter configuration at once, creating a minefield of multiple comparisons problems and p-hacking machines. And what's worst is that we can be lulled into accepting these recommendations thoughtlessly because of the domineering manner in which they are presented. We trust them because of their literal and rhetorical power, which we have instilled onto these entities. So, with all these troubles, what else are we to do but cry out to the divine? Behold! Inspired by the hands of fate, we've constructed Sortilege, a web-based visual analysis system that mimics the act of using tarot cards for divination, but tuned to the process of investigating important data properties. Our system follows a common analysis pattern. A user, who we'll refer to as the querent, uploads a data set of interest. We then generate a new deck of tarot cards to aid in this search. The user then deals the cards into a spread, which then enables them to divine their insights. But before diving into all that, let's step back a little bit. What actually is tarot, or for that matter, cartomancy? Well, cartomancy is the use of playing cards, such as tarot cards or just others, for divination. Tarot has a long history and a corresponding sprawling collection of variations of detail, form, and interpretation. The design of our deck is guided by the ubiquitous Rider-Waite deck, although there are many others of note following a wide variety of themes, designs, meaning, and many other contexts. Like traditional tarot decks, ours consists of 22 unique named cards and 56 numerical cards across 4 suits. We now consider each of these families of cards in turn. Our major arcana promotes skepticism and reflection, pushing querents to answer questions about unknown data rather than answer questions about the unknown, as might be found in traditional tarot. In particular, our major arcana pairs the traditional tarot major arcana with a value-laden symbol or character. These, in turn, are paired with a question, which asks the querent to consider the people involved in the analysis, the data as an artifact, as well as other statistical concerns. For instance, the one card, traditionally referred to as the magician, we describe as the analyst. This card pushes the querent to consider, did you seek advice from a statistical expert before analyzing your data? The chariot card traditionally denotes succor, providence, triumph, presumption, vengeance, or even trouble. Our chariot card shows summarization and pushes analysts to ask, is the level of data aggregation appropriate? As you might have seen in my previous talk, aggregations can cause all kinds of trouble. Our minor arcana contain automatically generated insights about the data set of interest. The insight itself is shown as a simple visualization, such as this bar chart. The interpretation of this insight is organized both by type of card as well as by number. The higher the value of the number, the higher the strength of the insight. We divide these types of insights into 4 traditional suits: swords, wands, pentacles, and cups, although we re-encode their meaning to suit our task. The suit of swords addresses data quality concerns. We reflect these concerns through a histogram, which shows the amount of missing or null values. The more missing values, the higher the suit. The suit of pentacles addresses extreme or unexpected numerical values, which we represent as a box plot with outliers shown in red. The greater the corresponding z-score, the higher the card. The suit of wands relates to patterns of categorical variance. After sweeping across all configurations of variables, we select the configurations with the highest variance and present them as bar charts. The higher the variance, the higher the card. Finally, our suit of cups covers the correlation and relationship between fields. By computing Pearson correlation for every pair of variables, we select scatter plots that have the highest correlation. The higher the correlation, naturally, the higher the card. While these algorithms are intentionally simplistic and have many of the drawbacks of more pedestrian automated visual analysis systems, they still are able to form a coherent and automatic picture of the data set at hand. Now that we've met all the components, we can see the system in action. Here the querent selects a predefined data set, in this case, the world indicators data set. A new deck is then generated, which the querent then draws from and into the Celtic cross spread. They can then conduct a reading to find answers to their questions. We now turn to a staged reading to make concrete the experience and divine design of our system. We'll take the role of the querent, seeking answers from the divine. In particular, we ask, what may be divine from this world indicators dataset? Our first card is drawn into the context position, the 8 of Swords. It indicates that a large percentage of CO2 emissions data is missing. This suggests that questions about emissions may be unanswerable in this context, although it is troubling that this is only the 8 of Swords, suggesting that there are larger missing subsets. Next, we draw into the hidden influences position, the Queen of Pentacles, showing inbound tourism. This suggests that while many countries have few incoming tourists, there are some countries with quite high numbers, reducing the central mass of unvisited countries to near invisibility in the box plot. Finally, we draw biases into the advice position. This card is also the Devil, which in traditional tarot denotes unbridled id or harmful attachment. Here, he pushes us to consider our idish biases when modeling and measuring our data. After our reading, questions remain. How prevalent are these data quality issues? Is it possible that there are groups of high or low metric countries that are skewing other parts of the dataset? This reading is just one particular draw from this particular deck. A different querent will doubtless receive an entirely different set of cards with entirely different meanings that promote entirely different questions. The power of the stochastic and limited view is that it raises questions about what the querent didn't see or might have seen in the data. We contrast this uncertainty and caution with traditional automated insight systems, where the querent might be left with the impression that the only insights that are recommended are important. Sortilege is subject to many of the same factors of concern as traditional automated analytics. It is inscrutable, fragile, and operates as a black box. Yet, we argue that sortilege is safer than existing designs. It encourages critical thought and skepticism, makes no pretense towards certainty, and requires users conduct interpretation themselves. By forcing a burden of interpretation onto the querent, we cut off the easy excuse that generated insights are objective or neutral. The human deals the cards, creates their interpretation, and links them together. They are an active rather than passive participant in the analysis, random and arbitrary though it may be. Conventional analytic systems go out of their way to build authority and perceived accuracy through tactics like suppressing uncertainty or using AI washing to convey unearned expertise. We make no such pretense. We go beyond simply improving the features of prior visual analysis tools and create a new one entirely, as our approach is natively physicalizable. This has untold and unmeasured benefits. For instance, instead of monitoring a dashboard to assess key metrics, one can simply perform a daily reading of a newly printed card deck. So as I was starting the slide, I realized I needed to have sound for the subsequent one, and so I need to stop my screen share and reshare it. I'm terribly sorry. Okay. Alt-Chi papers usually include commentary from scholars in the community as a way to prompt discussion. Here we present a commentary on our work from a local scholar, Galen Harrison.
data. Some people say it's the new oil. That's not true. The new oil is insight. In fact, the biggest problem facing innovators today is how to get the most insight out of the biggest data. What if I told you that there was a way you could get the most insight possible out of the largest of data? Folks, I'm talking about magic. If you don't believe me, the results speak for themselves.
In Sortilege, what are you doing when you engage in divination? Is it a life hack, a way to more effectively engage in positivist science, or are you actually engaging in a mystical process? In many ways, visualization recommendation systems are hyper-scientific. They want to do science about science, and the problems that Andrew, Anna Maria, and Michael are trying to address are results of that. By trying to engage mystical ways of knowing, Sortilege opens up the possibility that non-scientific ways of knowing may have a role in visualization. It is tempting to explain Sortilege and magic, witchcraft, and sorcery in scientific terms. However, this impulse should be resisted. Witchcraft is a situated phenomenon, and therefore necessarily cannot be understood through the disembodied scientific path. Even if many of us may not accept magical perspectives totally, we should acknowledge that pure scientific rationalism can and will lead scientists astray. Rather than attempting to commandeer non-scientific perspectives, visualization and HCI research should seek to engage with them on their own terms.
Thanks, Galen. With that context in hand, we now reach our conclusion. We conducted this critical design exercise in order to comment on a trend in visualization research, as well as other fields, namely that there is simply too much trust being placed in unaudible automatic tools. We believe that as tool and systems builders, we should not just enable, but push our users to engage in critical reflection and skepticism as they go about their work. So what are you to do if you aren't a visualization researcher? Well, don't blindly trust automated analytics. Think more carefully about the who, how, and why of your data. And of course, question all of your assumptions. And with that, I'll conclude my talk. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll be happy to take any questions you might have here or on the internet. Well, elsewhere on the internet.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, we do have some time for a couple of questions. We can take chat questions over Zoom chat, YouTube chat, or raising your hand. And actually, so while we're waiting for a question, Andrew, actually, I have one for you. Mm-hmm. So, as you were discussing your proposal, it reminded me in some ways both of creativity cards as well as more traditional HCI kind of heuristic checklists and things like that. So I'd be interested to hear you compare and contrast your proposal with those schemes, as well as kind of for you to kind of illuminate what are the particular qualities that you hope the invocation of magic brings to this implementation.
Our work bears a close resemblance to creativity cards or mechanisms of creative constraint, such as Alipo or the Eno's oblique strategies, methods of sort of pushing you out of your normal lines of analysis. What our context has that's a little bit different than that is that it brings those things into what's normally sort of an austere, sort of like apparently objective environment. People tend to think of visual analysis systems like, say, Tableau or Power BI or, pick your favorite, as these objective like things of like, get objective true answers. And the kind of thing that we look to do with this is to sort of shake people out of that. Really just question your assumptions when you're doing your data. And this connects naturally to the earlier talk on Mirages in that, you can get a lot done by just being aware of what you're doing and being like careful and cautious of the way that you're approaching your analysis process. And so, like the Mirage paper talks about an automated strategy for doing that. Here we talk about sort of a way to sort of change the user rather than changing the analysis process. Hopefully they'll, through the invocation of magic, they'll be magically transformed into someone who thinks more carefully about their data.
Great. Are there any other questions?
You can go play with this demo or play with our system at viztero.github.io if you're curious.
All right. Well, I guess in the absence of further questions, let's do a Zoom thank you to Andrew. And if you could unshare your screen, and we're going to have Jenna share her screen in a moment. Jenna, I just co-hosted you. And so up next, while Jenna's getting set up, Andrew, we do have a question over chat. The context is, I'm a media artist in Canada. Have you considered the relationship between entoptic imagery, entoptic being Greek for between vision, which mediates endogenous interpretation, the human central nervous system interpretation of exogenous stimuli?
I really want to answer that question. It seems to be a well-formed question, but I unfortunately don't know a lot of those words. If you want to message me about that, I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about it. I'm sorry, I just don't have a good answer for you.
Okay, great. And the question asker wrote, sure. All right, so great. So it looks like Jenna has gotten the screen share going. So quick introduction. Jenna Cryan is a PhD student in our department, is presenting Detecting Gender Stereotypes, Lexicon versus Supervised Learning Methods. And this paper received an ACM Chi Honorable Mention Award. And so actually I figured, I don't think we've highlighted this yet. So we're presenting, in addition to Andrew's All Chi talk you just heard, 7 talks from the main Chi conference. And it was actually astounding to me that of those seven papers, actually the one that started off Jazz's talk, received a Best Paper award, and an additional 4 received honorable mention awards for Best Paper, which in those categories represent respectively top 1% and top 5% of submissions to the conference. And so I think it's actually just quite phenomenal, that the Chi community is recognizing the quality of work from our students and colleagues with those awards. All right, and so Jenna, I'll let you at this point take it away.
Awesome. All right, so hi, I'm Jenna. I'm going to be talking about some work that we've done with my collaborators at University of Chicago and UC Santa Barbara. We've been looking into detecting gender stereotypes with Lexicon and supervised learning methods. So biases in language influence how we interact with each other's and in society as a whole. And in particular, previous studies have looked at how gendered language reinforces gender stereotypes. Unfortunately, the current tools that we have for measuring gender in language are pretty lacking. There's been a long history of exploring the differences between the sexes, how these differences contribute to perceived gender roles in society, and how these contribute to perceptions of masculinity and femininity. However, these studies were done back in the 60s and the 70s, and what we want to know now is whether or not these previous studies reflect current gender stereotypes. In terms of modeling text and language, there's been a long history of using a very simple bag of words approach, where a large body of text is broken down into single words or maybe a couple words, tokens, and each of these tokens are assigned a score or a label, and collectively these scores and labels are used to measure something in the text, whether it be sentiment analysis, or in our case, we're interested in gender. And these can be combined with word embedding models, which look at how these words are used frequently together. And both of these are very simple to implement. They've been used very well over the course of many years, but more recently, there's been more sophisticated approaches to this, which include deep learning neural networks. And these will allow you to input a single body of text. It could be a paragraph, a sentence, or an entire article, and get a single label at the end. Unfortunately, these require very, very large amounts of training data. For a simple NLP model that could require tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of training data sets that are labeled. And that's not really reasonable for most researchers. So thankfully, in recent years, large companies like Google, who do have access to these large training data sets, will release pre-trained models that are trained for a generalized task, in this case, text analysis. And then it can be fine-tuned with a limited amount of additional training data. And up until now, there's been pretty limited research of how these models could be applied specifically to gendered language. So we want to find out how these lexicon and what we consider end-to-end approaches, where you can just input a large body of text and get out a label, how these approaches compare to each other. So looking back, the golden standard up until now has been the BSRI and the PAQ, which back in the 70s, they asked college students about what kinds of traits they would associate with masculine or feminine stereotypes that were desirable in US society. And then from that, they came up with these lexicons of feminine, neutral, or masculine words. And these studies have been used as such a golden standard that even nowadays, commercial companies are using these to measure gendered language. For instance, Text.io back in 2014 started up a service that, based on these specific lists, will look at what feminine and masculine toned words. They'll assign each word a score, add up the entire score for a job advertisement, and tell employers whether or not their job advertisements are gendered towards one specific gender or the other. But since then, more research has actually looked into how these BSRI traits have changed over time. And Donnelly et al. Looked at many, many studies that used the BSRI, and they found that women nowadays do not endorse the same traits that they used to back in the 70s. More specifically, our group recently looked at these companies like Text.io, and we found that the same traits are not endorsed over time. And by changing the language does not necessarily change the perceptions of these job advertisements. So overall, the last 50 years or so, this lexicon approach has been used as the absolute golden standard. And it's simple, and it used to work very well. But I mentioned feminine and masculine could cancel each other out. For instance, in a job advertisement, if there's equally amount of feminine and masculine words, they could just cancel each other out and the employer would not know the difference. And it's very unclear whether or not these are able to capture how these words are used in different contexts. And as I've shown, they seem to be quite outdated because they are from 40 to 50 years ago. So our first question is how well these lexicons represent current perspectives. So we took a data-driven approach in order to create a new lexicon and look at how that compares to these previous lexicons. We took the Wikipedia data, which is all of the data that's on Wikipedia, and what we were most interested is language that describes. So we parsed out all of the adjectives and verbs that are used to describe a person. And then we asked Amazon Turk workers whether or not we looked at just the most frequent 1,000 verbs or adjectives because it was too much to ask them to rate all 10,000 words. So we asked them how well they would associate these words with a typical male or female in US society. Then we trained several different combinations of unsupervised and supervised machine learning models with these words. And if you want more details on the exact combinations that we used, I'd refer you to a paper because it's too much for this right now. But we looked at different word embeddings and different machine learning models, and we trained these models with our limited data set. And then we used that data to generate scores for the remaining words. And this entire lexicon, now we would be able to look at a large body of text and generate some kind of score of whether it skews towards masculine or feminine stereotypes. Overall, what we found is that the unsupervised models, unsurprisingly, did not work very well. The supervised models did show promise, and in particular, the best models that we found were the linear regression and the SVM combined with a word-to-vec word embedding model. But still, the results weren't very great. So what we found is that these lexicons don't reflect modern language use. We compared our lexicon to the words that were used in the previous BSRI, the PAQ, and Gauscher et al. Made a combination of these and some other gendered words. And we found that we were not able to match very many of those words, which shows that many of those words are not actually used nowadays to describe people. And overall, these models were not able to effectively work in context. The way that the words were used, they still were not able to accurately measure the gendered language compared to our user study. So next, we wanted to see if we can improve this lexicon methodology and measure gendered language in text with newer models. So in 2018, Google came out with what they call BERT, which is a sophisticated language model that's been trained on billions of words and millions of different articles of text. And this is a general language model that then can be used with a little bit of extra training data to fine tune for our specific task. So we needed an extra training data on large bodies of text. So we went to Prolific, which is a crowdsourcing site, and we asked people to find 4 articles online that either were consistent or contradictory with male or female stereotypes. We used this extra data to train the BERT model for fine-tuning for our task. And then in order to make sure that our original labeled data wasn't biased, we validated with an additional user study on the same training data, and we found very comparable results. Overall, our end-to-end approach, where we can just take a larger body of text, put it into the BERT, fine-tuned BERT model, showed way better accuracy than any of our lexicon approaches. Even after we expanded the lexicon beyond the labeled data, we still didn't find that it increased the accuracy significantly. And the end-to-end approach was able to capture much more context, even with our limited amount of additional training data. Furthermore, we looked at this, a real-world application of this. So based on our previous work, we had looked at how these state-of-the-art online tools compared or evaluate job advertisements. So I mentioned Text.io, and there's an additional model, Unitive, that uses a very similar lexicon approach. And we looked at how our end-to-end approach will compare when evaluating job advertisements that were pulled from LinkedIn.com. We asked the participants about how many women they would assume would be in such a job position, and how likely they thought that this specific job advertisement would appeal to women. And we found that our end-to-end approach was more successful at predicting these than both the state-of-the-art Text.io and Unitive. So looking forward, we know that gendered language is used all around us in society, in news articles, Wikipedia entries, biographies of everybody, all the way through movie scripts and novels that we read. And we hope that this work, by identifying how gendered language is used, we can hopefully improve it in the future and prevent gender stereotypes from negatively affecting us in the future. And I would just like to thank all of my collaborators, and questions are welcome now or through email.
There's a question already in the chat for Maribel.
I'll pull up the chat. I'm trying to pull up the chat.
Read it, Jenna. Do you want me to read the question?
Oh, yes, please. Oh, there we
So
go.
Maribel says, excellent work, Jennifer. A rigorous and detailed approach on an important subject matter that continues to plague us. It's not a question. It's a comment how awesome your work is.
Also,
but there's a question from Henry. Sorry, go ahead, Marshall.
So I was just going to say, we had a blip where Blaze was not made the host anymore. So if we can make him the host, he can't unmute himself.
Oh, yes. I see Henry's question right now. Whether or not I ensured that the Amazon Turk workers were Americans. We did restrict as much as you're allowed to on Turk to Americans, but that's assuming trust on behalf of the workers that they are American. But we did try to specifically restrict our workers with Turk and Prolific that they were American, because we understand that cultural differences regarding are very significant. So we did try to, yes.
Okay, are there, now that I can unmute myself again, are there any other questions? While we are waiting for other questions, I guess Jenna, it might be hard for you to answer this definitively, but I guess as you move kind of from like the Lexicon approach to your end-to-end approach, and using things like BERT, both the model change and the data, both the model and the data end up changing. So do you have a sense of is it the model that's contributing to the better performance? Is it the having extra data that's contributing to it? Or your spectrum?
That's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So we hope that by using the Wikipedia data dump as ours for the Lexicon approach, and I didn't show it, but we did do a breakdown of where people sent their articles in from. Most of them were from Wikipedia or a few other news sites were the top ones, but very significantly from Wikipedia. So we felt that the data was comparable for that. It is very different, especially how, people writing in text online versus how they use it also in speaking language. But we hoped that the training data for both was comparable, but certainly, again, looking at, different cultures and different mediums, it could change the results.
Great. Are there any other questions? All right, well, so in that case, let's thank Jenna one more time, I guess virtually on mute. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break, a little bit, 5 to 7 minute break before we start the next session, which is scheduled to begin 6 minutes from now at the top of the hour, which is 1 o'clock Central here in Chicago. So we'll keep everything set up, and then we're going to start again promptly at the top of the hour with the next session that Marshall will be session chair. So I'll look forward to seeing you then. We'll step away for 1 second.
Hey. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So we're here to open up the final session at UChicago Chi Cargo, and this is on privacy and ads. So we have an exciting session with 3 papers in this session, and we're starting off with a really great paper. This was featured in the New York Times. It won an honorable mention award at the conference, which Blaise mentioned in the previous session is only given to the top 5% of papers submitted to the conference. And the interesting thing about this is it's a wearable microphone jamming, and we'll find out all about that. The speakers are Yuxin Chen and Shan-Yuan Teng. Both of them are PhD students in the Department of Computer Science here at UChicago. Yuxin is actually advised by Ben and Heather. And you can find out more about both of them in the chat, where I've pasted links to both of their profiles. And Shan-Yuan is also a PhD student here, and he's advised by Pedro Lopes. So faculty on this were Pedro, Lopes, Ben Zhao, and Heather Zhang as well. So let's get started. So I believe, Yuxin, you will probably start off. Are you ready to share your screen? Great, take it away.
Okay, so hi, my name is Yuxin. Today, Shan-Yuan and I are going to talk about this idea of wearable microphone jamming. This is on behalf of our colleagues Huiying, Steven, Zhijing, and our advisors Pedro, Ben, and Heather at the University of Chicago. This idea is about using a wearable to disable microphones in user surroundings so that these microphones cannot secretly listen to the user. And I want to show you directly what I'm talking about.
So, how does it work?
I can tell you how it works, but it's confidential.
So these 2 people are having some private conversation, and to protect their privacy, she is going to turn on the privacy bracelet. As a result, the camera only recorded this joint white noise. This noise is so loud that it disables the microphone's ability to do any useful recording. And besides the camera, other microphones in this scene are also disabled, like his smartphone, his smartwatch, and this voice assistant. And then we play the rest of the video, and as you will see, they are still having normal conversation. This is because this noise is something that somehow only the microphones can hear, but not humans. So why do we need a microphone jammer? Today, microphones are everywhere, like the voice assistant right here. They are also in your kitchen. They are even in your car. But unfortunately, these microphone-based devices are not secure and can be easily attacked. Here is an example discovered by a previous study. This user is talking to the voice assistant, and the top left corner shows the attacker's screen.
Alexa, stop. Goodbye. I will vote Democrats.
So this is just one basic attack. There are several more advanced attacks out there. So how can we protect ourselves against such privacy threat? One promising way that researchers have been looking at is to jam microphones. One simple idea is to blast super loud noise into the room to cover human voice, like this white noise generator. But this is not effective because it also disrupts human normal conversation. And recently, Roy and his colleagues found a new way to jam microphones. They use inaudible ultrasound instead of using audible noise. And let me tell you how it works. Our microphones are designed to only record sounds that humans can hear. And ideally, ultrasound should not be captured. But in fact, when ultrasound passes through the microphone, it automatically gets shifted and leaks to the low frequency range. And this is caused by hardware defects, which are the nonlinearity of the microphone's amplifier and diaphragm. So with this property, we can send ultrasound to cover human voice without interrupting normal conversation. And you can even buy these devices on the market. They work well. Microphones close to these devices can be jammed, but they share 3 limitations. The first one is that they are all stationary devices. They do not go with user. And the second one is that they have limited angular coverage. You need to point them to the target microphones to jam. If you don't know where the microphone is, then the jammers will not work. And even you know where the microphone is, your primary task as an user is not doing whatever you are doing, such as having a conversation, but your primary task is now looking at things and points your jammer to the target microphones. Another thing makes this even harder is that the jamming coverage is not evenly distributed. There are some blind spots where the jamming signal is so weak, like the white spots right here. And this is because these ultrasonic jammers are relying on multiple transducers to increase power and coverage. So signals from these transducers can destructively interfere with each other at some locations and create blind spots. This means you need to point it fairly precisely, otherwise you are going to point it to the blind spot and the jammer will not work. So we tackle these 3 problems by turning ultrasonic jammer into a wearable jammer. And let me show you how this solves all the problems I just mentioned. First of all, it's a wearable, so it moves with the user and it protects the user's surroundings. And we use a ring layout and place ultrasonic speakers all around. This design effectively enables multi-directional jamming. We ran a simulation to see how these things work. This figure shows the jamming power of a 90-degree area. The jammer is placed in the bottom left corner and point to the top. Blue means weak jamming and yellow means strong jamming. As you can see here, the planar layout has limited coverage. It mostly jams in the front, and it has several blind spots. For our ring layout, the jammer covers all directions. But as you can see, there are still blind spots. So let me show you how making it a wearable jammer can solve this blind spots problem. We found that adding small motion to the jammer can blur out these blind spots. And by building a wearable jammer, we can leverage natural hand gestures to reduce blind spots. We also ran a simulation to confirm our findings. And I will let Shan-Yuan to take over and tell you how we implemented this wearable jammer.
Hi, I'm Shan-Yuan Teng. Let me show you the real device here. And if you see me in the corner of your Zoom window, you can try toggle the speaker view to see me full screen. And this should be on the top right corner. So we designed our wearable jammer in a bracelet form. We place all the ultrasonic transducers in a ring layout. And inside this casing, you see our custom circuits. So we use a programmable microcontroller and connect it to a signal generator here that we program to generate changing sine waves that centered around the resonance frequency of these transducers. That is, we sweep between 24 to 26 kilohertz, and they are all in human inaudible range. And then we amplify the signal through an amplifier. All our circuits and these transducers are powered by a lithium battery here that can support 4 hours of continuous jamming. So if I turn this on, this should generate ultrasound that produce audible noise for the microphone of my laptop that is recording me, but because they are ultrasound, that I should not hear it. So let me try turn this on. Off, and now you should hear me again. Okay. So we evaluated our prototypes through 3 technical evaluations and a user study. I'll just focus on highlights today. This experiment is to understand how well our prototype jams state-of-the-art speech recognizer. We place an audio speaker near our prototype and play back human speech from the large corpus. To approximate hand movements, we place our prototype on a motion platform that slightly rotates and let it jam continuously. Then we recorded the audio using the smartphone that was put 1 meter away. We piped the audio to a state-of-the-art machine learning speech recognizer, which is IBM Cloud that we used, and see how much text is able to be identified. We moved our smartphone around the jammer to measure the jamming coverage every 5 degrees from the front to the rear. Then, we ran the same experiment with i4, the existing commercial product, and the planar layouts, which we find in the literature. So here's the results of our wearable jammer. The x-axis is the different angles we measured, and the y-axis is the word error rate that we found by comparing the speech recognition results and the corpus scripts. This shows how many words are recognized incorrectly. The higher, the better jamming performance. We see our wearable jammer jam pretty well in all the angles. Here is an example of the data. This is the original speech we played, and this is the recorded audio with our jamming. We see only the first 2 words can be recognized. Other words are either being recognized as wrong words or the recognizer just completely missed it, resulting in a high word error rate. The gray line is the jamming results of i4, the commercial product. It not only shows that the jamming coverage is very limited, but also there's a clear blind spot in its coverage, where much less words are jammed. The planar layout, shown in this black line, also has similar trends, with limited coverage and the blind spots. Compared to the other 2 jammers, our wearable prototype has wide coverage and similarly well jamming performance. However, in this experiment, we were controlling all the environment's variables and the corpus is scripted. There are no real users. Therefore, we decided to invite users to use our prototype. We wanted to understand whether wearing our jamming bracelet impacts one's feeling of privacy in a natural setting. The participants we recruited were asked to have free-form conversations, which were not scripted. They exchanged the bracelets in the conversation, while the phones on the table were recording. After the conversation, participants were given transcripts, which were generated using speech recognition from the phone's recording. We found out that participants feel that our bracelets protected their privacy, rating an average of 5.4 out of 7. We interviewed the participants. Some say the bracelets was noticeable, but they forgot about it, or stopped feeling odd about wearing it once they focused on the conversation. Some feels more protected, either when wearing the bracelet or by simply seeing others wear it. I'll let Yuxin to wrap up our talk.
So to conclude, we design, implement, and use a wearable ultrasonic jammer to protect users all around against eavesdropping microphones. And the jammer has full angular coverage and minimized blind spots. As we are surrounded by microphones all the time, our wearable jammer provides users a practical and effective tool to protect their privacy. We believe this is a great start point, and it also opens new directions for more researchers, including understanding its influence to animals, testing on more microphones, increasing its vertical coverage, and building it in other form factors. And I want to thank our colleagues and our advisors. Thank you, and we are happy to take any questions.
Thank you. That was an awesome talk and probably one of the best demos I've ever seen live. So I'd love to open it up for questions. You're welcome to post questions on the chat or raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I will look to see if anyone has their hand raised. while we're waiting for questions on the chat, I was curious about what is the range of the jamming? So does the person have to be pretty close to the device like you have in this initial video, or does it have quite a wide range?
Yeah, so I will answer this question. So currently, for our prototype, the jamming coverage is roughly, we tested on 1 meter, and I think this range can like increase into maybe 1.5, but we only tested 1 meter. And it's possible to like increase the power of our prototype to increase the further coverage.
Great, thanks. I'm just looking here. There's another question from Jenna here. And Jenna asked, did any participants discuss why they felt not completely protected while wearing the privacy enhancing bracelet? So, they didn't all give it 7 out of 7, for example. So were they skeptical of the technology at all?
I think I can answer this question. So our bracelet actually depends a bit on the slice motion of the hands movements. And so there could be some circumstances that a word can slip through the speech recognizer. And it depends on how important that word is. Sometimes it can be an important word for the user, but sometimes they don't really care. So in one case, like they're talking about Facebook, and then the word Facebook actually slips through this speech recognition, and so they feel like they actually knows a lot about the conversation, so that lowers their score. So actually, like, people have different opinions on how much information leakage impact the feeling of privacy.
Oh, super interesting. So we have another question, and thanks for that great answer. The question here is, if there were malicious attackers who wanted to circumvent this bracelet, how difficult would this be?
Yeah, so I will answer this question. This is a very good question. So basically, this is actually not able to circumvent, because it happens on the hardware level on the microphone. So if an attacker is going to like remove the noise, because this noise is already inside the signal, so it's not possible to like remove this on the software level, I think.
Great, good to know. So actually related to that, Roshan Paris also asked another question, which was, and also there was a comment, great work in live demo. Can an audio filter be used to remove the ultrasound audio?
Can you repeat the question again?
So it's, can an audio filter be used to remove the ultrasound audio? So I guess I'm not sure, but it sounds like the question is like the ultrasound audio that the microphone is hearing. Can that be removed with an audio filter?
I guess another way to frame that would be, I had a similar question. Sorry to jump in. Like, it was very clear to humans, if you're listening to the ultrasound, that it is jamming. Like, it sounds like noise. It doesn't sound like silence. I guess, is there a way to make it more imperceptible?
Sorry, the network connection is not very stable.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, the question is also in chat. And so, again, it's basically asking if the perceptible ultrasound audio that the microphone hears, can that be removed, I think, with an audio filter?
I can try to answer that if Shan-Yuan and Yuxin's connection is flaky at the moment. So Jenna, just to be clear on your question, you were saying it's clear to humans that it's jamming. So humans never hear the jamming, which is actually quite an open challenge for you to understand if your jammer is on or off. There's certainly some other project in there that's probably very interesting. But it is very clear for a computer that some super loud sound just started because the jammer does this random approach where it tries all the frequencies. And so the computer or the microphone is going to just get all the frequencies excited really fast. Now, to answer the subsequent question that Roshan had, can we just audio filter this out? Unfortunately not. We've been actually trying very hard. In fact, Yuxin and Heather and Ben have been trying very hard to attack our own jammer, and we can't attack the jammer because of two main reasons. The first one is that the problem happens at the hardware level, and there's nothing you can really do about it. It's not just putting a low-pass filter or something, because before that, the microphone circuit, the first amplifier, already got jammed. Right. Then the second problem is that even if you could solve this on the software level, right, just by audio filtering out, the problem is actually the stuff you're trying to filter to recover is quieter than the jammer. So the jammer, the way I typically tell people what this jammer does is it shouts really loud over you, right? So you're trying to speak and the jammer is like shouting over that. And so it's impossible to retrieve that information because the signal is just weaker than the noise. But please, everyone, attack this jammer. We need to figure out how it works.
That's amazing. Thank you. That was a brilliant answer. And sorry to our speakers who are having difficulties. We still really enjoyed your talk. And I think just giving the time, although there are a bunch of different questions, I'll leave it to the co-authors to answer that. And now we'll be moving on to our next talk in the session. So our next talk is by Julia Hanson. And Julia, interesting fun fact. So Julia started off as an undergrad here at UChicago in the Department of Computer Science. And she started off working with Blaise, who co-directs the supergroup with me. And now she's a PhD student in our department. And so here she's going to talk to us about another honorable mention paper. So remember, again, this is one of the top 5% of the papers presented at CHI this year. And she's going to talk to us about hyper-personalized ads and how that's actually affecting Crowdworkers' privacy perceptions and decisions. Okay, so Julia, if you're ready, take it away.
Okay. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Let me move myself out of the way. Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm Julia. Today, I will be presenting our paper, Taking Data Out of Context to Hyper-Personalize Ads, Crowdworkers, Privacy Perceptions, and Decisions to Disclose Private Information. So in the old days, advertisements were marketed to broad, heterogeneous audiences. For example, a billboard showing an ad about vacations to Hawaii would be seen by everyone passing by. But today, the rise of web tracking, email tracking, and data marketplaces has enabled far greater personalization. Advertisers infer users' interests and demographics to create increasingly targeted and personalized ads. A logical next step would be hyper-personalized ads like this one. Julia, plant enthusiasts like you love Hawaii. Book your flight from Chicago today. Prior work has shown that people can find some personalized ads creepy. Personalization reflects a potential misuse of data, since data used for personalization is collected in one context, but then reused in another. These observations raise two questions. First, how would you respond to seeing your data recontextualized in a hyper-personalized ad? And how could you prevent unwanted reuse of your data in the future? Well, one strategy you might try for preventing unwanted reuse is to limit information disclosure by being more hesitant about giving information out in the first place. This brings us to our main research question. Would seeing a creepy, hyper-personalized ad cause feelings of privacy invasion that would then alter information disclosure behavior? To explore this question, we designed an experiment. We used the prolific crowdsourcing platform to recruit participants. Our design was the following. First, show participants either a generic ad or a hyper-personalized ad, then ask them a series of invasive questions with the option not to answer. So we hypothesized that as a way to protect their privacy, those who saw the hyper-personalized ad would answer fewer invasive questions than those who saw the generic ad. Okay, now we'll get into our methods in a little bit more detail. So we wanted to show an ad, but for validity, participants couldn't know the ad was from us. So we designed a deception protocol. The protocol had two parts. In part one, we collected the information we needed to personalize the ad. Then we waited over a week so participants would forget what information we collected. And in part two, we showed the ad and asked invasive questions. We compensated participants $1 for part one, which took 5 minutes, and $4 for part two, which took 30 minutes. As part of our deception, we initially gave a generic study title, The Demographics, Interests, and Experiences of Americans. And instead of using our university affiliation when posting the survey, we posed as the fictional Institute for Interests and Demographics Research, IIDR. So the goal of part one was to obtain consent and gather the information we needed for the ad without arousing our participants' suspicion. So to do this, we elicited information about our participants amidst a bunch of distractor questions. And within those, we asked for participants' name, phone number, preferred cuisine, relationship status, and partner's name. We also used IP geolocation to estimate their town level location. So having gotten information for hyper-personalizing an ad in part one, we waited a week so participants would have time to forget about the information they gave. And then we were ready to show participants the ad in part two. When participants began part two, our software automatically triggered either the display of a banner ad on the first page of the survey or the delivery of a robotext to the participant's cell phone. Robotexts are increasingly being used for personalized ads. Furthermore, as they would likely be received on a different device than the survey, participants would be less likely to associate the ad with our survey. So with the information collected from part one, we were able to create personalized ads like this banner ad, which says, Taylor, treat Ryan to a date night this week in Memphis. We know you love Thai restaurants. Use supereats.co to reserve a table at one of the 7 near you for a deal. On the left is the personalized ad we just saw. And as a control, we created parallel generic ads with no personalization. So these ones read, treat yourself this week. Use supereats.co to reserve a restaurant near you. The robotext ads we sent were also personalized or generic, with similar text to the banner ads. And they were sent from a short code, which is commonly used for commercial purposes. The short code here is that 474747 number at the top. To recap our study conditions, participants received either a banner ad or a robotext ad, and the ad was either personalized or generic. So after showing the ad, we asked a series of invasive questions. We created questions for this part of the survey, taking inspiration from sources like the American Housing Survey, the US Census, and Pew Research. We also gathered more sensitive questions from Facebook and magazine quizzes. From these sources, we selected 43 invasive questions reflecting a range of sensitivity. Earlier questions in our slate were low invasiveness, like how many years of experience do you have with using the internet? But the questions escalated to include things like, for what reason did you last cry? What is the first and last name of your best friend? And what is your home address? Crucially, each question had a conspicuous prefer not to say option. We called attention to this option at the start of the section and explicitly told participants they would not be penalized for selecting it. We hypothesized participants would select prefer not to say as a way to protect their privacy and limit information disclosure. Afterwards, we debriefed participants about the study's true nature. So we revealed that we were not the fake IIDR, but the University of Chicago, and that it was us who had sent the banner or robotext ad. Following the debrief, we also asked participants about their reactions and recollections of the ad, with questions like, do you remember seeing the ad? Do you remember it? Did you suspect it was study related at any point? And what factors did you consider when answering the invasive questions? Because participants could have protected their privacy by also answering the questions inaccurately, we showed them a list of their answers at the end of the survey and asked them to select any inaccurate ones. So here, we also emphasized that they would not be penalized for having given us inaccurate responses. We took great care to protect participant privacy and follow ethical best practices in this methodology. We used Prolific's deception filter to only recruit participants who had already consented to participating in deception studies. We worked with Prolific, and Prolific approved our study design for collecting PII, personal identifying information. And we made sure we debriefed participants who dropped out of the study early, given the importance of the debrief to our protocol. Finally, we deleted participant personal identifying information and immediately overwrote their answers to the invasive questions, retaining only whether they had answered each and done so accurately. Now for the results. We recruited 280 participants from Prolific to participate in our study. So first, how effective was our deception? We wanted to verify that participants did not associate the ad with the study contents. Following the debrief, participants self-reported whether they saw the ad and suspected it was study related. 92 participants, or 65%, were sent the robotext, saw it, and did not think it was study related. 85 participants, or 62%, were shown the banner ad, saw it, and were similarly not suspicious. The remainder of the results report only on these participants who saw it and did not suspect it was study related. We were interested in whether participants would be creeped out or react otherwise never received personalized ads, frequently reported feeling scared, concerned, shocked or surprised, creeped out, or uncomfortable, among other strong negative feelings. 53% of participants who saw a personalized banner ad reported such feelings, as did 44% of those who saw the personalized robotext ad. In contrast, no participants who saw the generic ad reported these negative feelings. Participants did in fact perceive our ads as creepy. So for example, participant 211 wrote, "I was quite alarmed by the ad, wondering how it knew my spouse's name and my location. I was disturbed and put off by it." Another participant who received a robotext responded to our text message directly to the shortcode, saying they would blast us on Twitter for sending such creepy ads. Participants' reactions, interestingly, often also tried to make sense of where the information came from. They tried to determine the source of the leak of their data. Some participants wrote about Google or Facebook, two highly visible data collectors. Participant 123 thought more specifically and wrote, "I had a noticeable reaction of both worry and disgust. And then I realized I had been visiting a lot of restaurant websites recently." So now for the information disclosure part of our results. So for each invasive question, recall we measured whether participants answered it instead of selecting prefer not to say, which will show those results in the gray circle. And we also measured whether participants reported answering it accurately, which will be shown in the white circle. All participants answered less sensitive questions, like those around internet usage. Many fewer participants answered the more sensitive questions. While 86% of participants answered, "For what reason did you last cry?" less than half answered, "What was the first and last name of your closest friend?" And only 15% answered, "What is your home address?" The average participant, though, answered 86% of all the questions, which was much higher than we expected. But we were most interested in whether information disclosure would differ by condition. So these box plots will show the total questions answered and total questions answered accurately for participants in each condition. So participants who received either generic or personalized robotext ads or generic or personalized banner ads. Yeah, okay. So despite participants' negative reactions to personalized ads, a Mann-Whitney U-test revealed no significant differences in the number of questions answered by participants based on whether they saw a personalized or generic ad. So just to pause here for a second, because this is two box plots to digest. We were wondering if for each group of 2 rows, there would be a difference in the total number of questions answered or questions answered accurately. And we did not find statistically significant differences across any of our personalized or generic conditions. So we asked participants how they chose between disclosing information or selecting prefer not to say. And participants revealed to us that they did have some method for deciding prefer not to say. 42% chose not to disclose information when they perceived the question to be too personal or embarrassing, such as when it crossed the line into their privacy. Other participants did not disclose information that was personally identifying or important for security. For example, questions that felt like phishing, mom's maiden name, were a no-go. I cared less about it being invasive and more about it being bad security. In contrast, why did participants decide to disclose information? First, it was influenced by time pressures for completing the study. To be honest, you're bombarded with information all the time, and for the most part, it's too much effort to try and keep up with everything. Participants also desired study compensation. When asked if they perceived risks in disclosing information, one participant shared, "I think there is a lot of risk, and if I wasn't flat broke, I wouldn't be doing this," which highlights known labor pressures on crowd workers. The final consideration was weighing the costs and benefits of disclosure, which in the privacy literature is known as performing privacy calculus, which we can see with the response from this participant. It's impossible to really know where the data goes after you leave it. This is very unrestricted territory, but the fact I get compensated makes me feel justified in taking any risks. Google takes all day, so does Amazon, so do many others. I don't get paid for that. This participant acknowledged the costs of not knowing where the data would go, but reasoned that because they get compensated, it would be worth it. Prior work has shown that crowd workers' trust in a requester and their reputation impacts whether they disclose information. To investigate whether this influenced our participants, we asked them how trustworthy they perceived our fake organization, IIDR. Participants reported very mixed trust, like, they're okay, I don't know a lot about them. But we found participants had a lot of trust in Prolific. 83% of participants mentioned trusting the study because it was on Prolific. Many described assumptions that Prolific vets its studies. One participant mentioned, "I feel like Prolific weeds out all the bad studies, so I had faith that Prolific would keep me safe." Prolific does not actually proactively screen studies on its platform. I'd like to conclude with some thoughts for discussion. The results of our study are interesting to consider in the light of the contextual integrity theory of privacy. Contextual integrity posits that privacy comes from appropriate flows of information, and privacy harms arise when information is unexpectedly used or reused, violating those appropriate flows. Our findings seem to support this theory, as participants had strong negative reactions to their information being repurposed for commercial ads, violating their expectations. However, contrary to our hypothesis, we did not observe participants change their information disclosure behavior as a result of a potential privacy harm. Perhaps participants compartmentalized the effects of various flows of information. That is, they still decided to disclose sensitive information to the survey when they didn't know from whom to protect their information after seeing the ad. This poses an interesting question. Do actors need to be identified for behavior change? This is a hard question to answer because who uses online data and how is not very transparent in the current online data economy. The findings of our study also have important implications for crowd work. Our crowd workers placed a lot of trust in Prolific to help them manage privacy risks. But crowdworking platforms largely assume that the workers themselves will decide what they're willing to disclose. The burden should not be placed on crowd workers. Instead, we need privacy by design on crowdworking platforms. Here, we suggest several ways of incorporating this. First, crowdworking platforms could introduce verification systems for requester identities. They could collaborate with IRBs to ensure requesters are behaving as they should. And further, crowdworking platforms could require requesters to disclose the purpose of data collection to give workers more transparency into how their data will be used. What directions are there for future work? First, future work could investigate what it takes to creep people out enough that they change their behavior, or what level of privacy violation results in a behavior change. A single ad wasn't enough in our study, but multiple over a longer period of time might be, or maybe no amount of creepiness is enough to cause behavior change, which raises interesting questions for assumptions of users' self-regulation. Future work could also investigate competing effects influencing information disclosure. Some participants could have taken a cautionary lesson from our study and decided not to share data again. Others could have been demoralized, had their privacy hopelessness confirmed, and decided there's no benefit trying to protect their privacy online at all. Why not answer more questions? Finally, future work could investigate non-crowdworking contexts to understand how others perceive risks related to disclosing information online. And that's all. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Julia. And so now I'll just open it up to say if anyone has a question for Julia, now's the time to ask it. We're running a little against the clock, but I think we have time for at least 1 to 2 questions. So one of the questions was, how did the people who said they did it because they need the money explain that logic when they would be paid, even if they selected prefer not to say? Is this different from the security calculus you discussed after answering out of gratitude for being paid, or is that the calculus taken to its extreme? Also, great work.
Great. That's a really great question because we were also puzzled by that result, given the fact that we emphasized so carefully that they would not be penalized for choosing prefer not to say. Basically, participants mentioned that they were still concerned about selecting prefer not to say too many times. And I think if you look at the crowdworking ecosystem as a whole, this result makes sense because other surveys often use attention checks, and which are kind of questions thrown in to make sure that your participant is paying attention. And then researchers later review those and throw out and don't pay participants who failed those checks or didn't answer enough questions. So I think a lot of crowd workers enter surveys with that kind of background anxiety of, I want to make sure I follow all of the directions because I don't want my submission to be rejected by the requester for not having done enough.
Great, and thank you, Henry Filosa, for that question. So we have one more question. So Ben, if you want to ask the question.
Yeah, hi, Julia. Really interesting work. You know, when you were just starting your talk, and it sort of brought me back to that. I don't know if you remember that scene in Minority Report when Tom Cruise first puts on that other dude's eyeballs and walks into a store and gets a super, hyper-personalized, of course, inappropriately personalized ad for him. And I'm just wondering, at least it seems like in certain contexts, people expect the sort of consensus future dystopia to be a place where this is all over the place, and therefore people are more accustomed to it, and they just adapt. Is that a feasible scenario in your sort of view? Because clearly right now there is this sort of discomfort, but one might argue that perhaps this is just an issue of not having enough time to adapt to that type of a society. And if that were pervasive and everybody just saw it everywhere, would people sort of overcome this discomfort and just say, it's okay, it happens to everybody, therefore I'm just going to give in and accept it?
Yeah, I think that kind of adaptation hypothesis is very valid and certainly proposed a lot in like media representations of this question. But one example that I like to look to kind of, so I as a privacy researcher would hope that that's not the case, that it's just a matter of time before we're all so habitualized to seeing these hyper-personalized ads that we stop fighting for our privacy at all. But one thing that this work made me think about more was the fact that these data transactions are so opaque, kind of plays a key role. And when people actually see named entities that have their information that they don't expect, they actually do react negatively. One example I like to point to is the SIFT data broker, which there was a story in the New York Times revealing all of this information that this third party no one had heard of had every Airbnb message you would ever sent. And after that article, their website for requesting your data crashed, which to me suggests that when people see the actors or realize more about who has what and who these third parties are, then they start feeling the sense of agency and can kind of speak out. So that's why I'm kind of interested in pursuing greater transparency with the hope that we can get greater action and intervene before that later stage of people being habitualized.
Great, thank you.
Great talk, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. Thank you, Ben, for the reference to Minority Report. And thank you, Julia, for that nice segue into our last and final talk. So last but not least for Chicago 2020 is a talk by a student that worked with me, Michael Swart, who's now a software engineer at Lyft. So Michael completed this work with myself and my PhD student, Arnesh Matha, both at Princeton University, and is now on to other things. But he's talking about how to help people recognize disguised ads on social media platforms. So kind of looking at this transparency question that Julia raised. Okay, so Michael, if you're ready, then I would say take it away.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see you and your screen.
Awesome, thank you. So I'll be presenting our paper, Is This an Ad? Automatically Disclosing All My Endorsements on YouTube with AdIntuition. And so first,
Are there cheaper options for dinner? Of course, of course. Considering they're super healthy meals, non-GMO, antibiotic-free and hormone-free for all of their meats, I think it's a really, really fun idea. So if you guys are interested, you guys can go to themillennialshow.com/blueapron, or you can find the link to click on below in my YouTube description. You can click that triangle over in this corner and it'll pop it open for you if you're on your phone. So the answer is yes and no. Blue Apron is cheaper than the grocery store your very first week, and it's about even or a little bit more than the grocery store for the weeks after.
Cool, so that was a video taken off of YouTube, and this is the video description here. And kind of just thinking about what she said and looking at the description here, it can be confusing to understand if this is or is not an advertisement. But after researching a little bit, we found that this is actually an advertisement. The link that she has here in the description is an affiliate link, it's called. And so she gets money each time the link is clicked. But it's kind of confusing because she never actually says that she will be making money anytime someone clicks this link. And also the video description is long. And so it's hard to actually find this link and understand that she'll be making money from it. And then finally, she has in her account like multiple lifestyle videos. And so to have some videos that are not sponsored next to videos that are sponsored, it can be confusing to tell which ones are truly genuine and which ones are sponsored. So this is an example of affiliate marketing. which is a type of social media marketing in which influencers make a percentage of the proceeds that they generate for a brand. And this graph down here kind of shows the funnel. So a lot of users might watch this YouTube video that I just showed you. And then she brings people to the Blue Apron website. And then some of those users will purchase the actual Blue Apron subscription. And so the brand makes money because they now have subscriptions, and the content creator makes money because she brought this traffic to the website. So there are 3 different methods for actually tracking affiliate marketing. The first one is affiliate marketing services. One of them is Blue Apron uses one of them called EVYY. And on the left here, you can see that the link that she had in the description has a kind of a redirect chain after it. And the second link in this redirect chain goes to the evyy.net URL, which tracks affiliate marketing content for Blue Apron. And so then Blue Apron will know where the content was actually sourced from. So Blue Apron uses an affiliate marketing service to do their tracking. Another one is adding urchin tracking module parameters to the URL that is being used to track. And so we can see here in the redirect chain that in the last URL, there's this UTM medium equals affiliate parameter, which kind of says to us that, hey, this person is an affiliate marketer, and we're tracking them based off of this URL. And so the actual URL itself could just contain those tracking parameters, and the brand will handle the tracking. And then finally, coupon codes are a great way for affiliate marketing brands to track affiliate marketing. And this is because these coupon codes can be individualized for each affiliate marketer, and they have to be used at checkout in order to get the discount. And so the user is incentivized to use the coupon code, and the coupon code is personalized so the brand can see actually which influencer brought in this the buyer to their brand. So we built off of one study that had been done before. Most of the work in this field isn't focused on disguised ads, but there was one study that showed that only about 10% of YouTube content creators actually disclose these relationships, and not all of these disclosures are clear that they're actually going to be making money. And so this study also found that users are not able to distinguish between sponsored and unsponsored content, especially without these disclosures, which happen not very frequently. So based off of this previous work, we asked a couple of research questions. The first is, can we create a browser extension to make it easier to determine when these relationships exist? The second one was, how prevalent is affiliate marketing on YouTube? And then the third one is, like, assuming that we could create this browser extension, does it actually help users to determine that affiliate marketing is present? So our approach, we used a list of these affiliate marketing services from that previous study. They found 108 patterns. Then we also created a coupon code classifier. So basically what we did was we took a bunch of YouTube descriptions, found ones that manually marked ones that had coupon codes in them, and then built a classifier on top of that to try and find out, like, in a YouTube description, is there a coupon code present? And then we also manually inspected 4,500 videos to find UTM parameters corresponding to affiliate marketing. And so from these 3 sources, we built a browser extension called AdIntuition for Chrome and Firefox. And basically what this browser extension does is, as users watch YouTube videos, it flags these 3 sources of affiliate marketing. So affiliate marketing by URL, UTM parameters, and coupon codes. And so it flags all 3 of those as users are watching YouTube videos in real time. And so this is just like a screenshot of the display. On the top of the screen, right below the search bar, a red banner pops up containing a disclosure saying, this video contains affiliate links. If you click on highlighted links, the creator receives a commission. And then in the description, the actual source of the affiliate marketing is highlighted so that they know where the affiliate marketing is coming from. So we performed 3 studies. After building the browser extension, we performed 3 studies to test different things. The first was how good is our browser extension. The second one is trying to understand the user experience. And then the third one was trying to understand the performance of AdIntuition. So in the first study, we looked at the efficacy of our browser extension. We conducted it over Amazon's Mechanical Turk for 300 participants. And in this study, users watched 1 of 3 videos, each of which contained an affiliate marketing URL. And then we split users into 2 groups based off of those videos. So the control group had no banner or highlighted link, and the experimental group had a banner disclosure and highlighted link, like I showed you in the previous screenshot. And so the graph down here shows the breakdown of people based off of each category. So for each video, we tried to go half and half in the control group and the treatment group. And so the results of this study found that 71.4% of the experimental group thought that a relationship was likely or highly likely, compared to 56.3% of the control group. So it did help to users to see if there was an affiliate marketing content in the video. In the second study, we wanted to understand individual users' experience using the tool. So we conducted it over 2 weeks with 12 participants. And basically what we did was we asked users to download AdIntuition and log a diary entry whenever they saw AdIntuition flag a video, and then record their thoughts about the tool. And we also conducted a pre-study and post-study interview to see about their browsing habits and what they thought of the tool once their 2 weeks was done. So in this study, we found that 26% of the total diary logs found that participants were surprised that some videos contained affiliate marketing. And so in the video that I showed at the beginning of this talk, that could be an example of one that an individual might find surprising, that it contained advertising. 6 out of 11 participants found that AdIntuition made them think more about sponsorships on YouTube. And a few participants even expressed increased skepticism over whether influencers genuinely endorse a product or were paid to do so. So in our final study, we had users download AdIntuition in the wild and then track their interactions with the tool by building in some tracking features. They were given the option to opt out and view their data because we wanted to make sure that we were as open as possible about this. And then we measured the effectiveness of the detection techniques by tracking these things. And so in the bottom here, there's a sample log. In the second column, there are the different events that we tracked. So add username was basically like the user downloaded the extension. And then there are 4 events that happen like in really quick succession here. One of them is the video watch event, which doesn't contain the URL or the video ID because we wanted to maintain user privacy. So instead of having the full user's watch history, we just tracked video IDs for videos that contained affiliate marketing. And so then the next 3 are one of each of the types of affiliate marketing. And for these, we did actually track the video ID. And then finally, in this sample log, there's another video watch event. And again, we didn't track the video ID for this one because we didn't want to track all of the videos that the user watched. And so the results of this study, we let it run for 82 days and 472 users downloaded the extension this time, and they watched almost 61,000 videos. 6,000 of these were true positives and contained at least one of the indicators of affiliate marketing. Some of these videos were watched twice, but since we didn't have each individual video that was watched, only the ones that contained affiliate marketing, we could only find that the affiliate marketing videos that were watched more than once. So in total, we found that there were almost 4,500 unique affiliate marketing videos that were watched. The two graphs at the bottom here show individual users over time. On the left, it's like how many affiliate marketing videos did they see over the minimum number of days that they were active. And interestingly, at the beginning, they showed like a little bit of initial interest to kind of make sure the tool worked. And then it drops off a little bit, but then it spikes back up after they start using the tool like without interest in if the tool works. And then towards the end, it kind of tails off a little bit more again. And then on the right, it's individual users. And kind of interestingly, the percentage of users that are at 0% tails off after 11 days, probably because they never found any videos that had affiliate marketing. And so they deleted the extension. And this was interesting, we thought, because affiliate marketing does somewhat depend on which videos you're watching. And so for some users, it could be really high. Like some of these in the first couple of days are almost at 80%. And then some of them it's at 0%. So it does a little bit matter what videos that the users are watching. And so then for the results, we found that in the wild, the coupon code classifier had a true positive rate of 81%. And because we were tracking the coupon code disclosures in this, we can further like improve our classifier with this additional data. And then we also found that the UTM parameters had a lower bound true positive rate of 75%, which we thought was pretty good, given that originally we were tracking all UTM parameters, and then these were just ones that we manually confirmed to have affiliate marketing in their parameters. And some of these would just be hard for us to track because they can be completely decided by the brand. So it could be like a random string, and that could be hard for us to manually see. But 75% we thought was pretty good for this. And then the graph on this page shows the percentage of content seen by the source. So known affiliate was the largest and UTM parameters were the smallest. So overall takeaways from our project here is that AdIntuition does help people to identify affiliate marketing content. People were more skeptical of content overall and more aware of sponsored content when using AdIntuition. And AdIntuition can successfully identify affiliate marketing content on YouTube in real time. Coupon codes and UTM parameters can be used as signals of affiliate marketing content. So overall implications of this, undisclosed affiliate marketing is a problem. Tools like AdIntuition can help users to find affiliate marketing content on YouTube and other social media platforms. Browsers or social media platforms in the future could integrate automatic affiliate marketing disclosures into their capabilities. And platforms could even require users to disclose affiliate marketing content by using similar capabilities to flag relationships. So like this would look like as a user clicks upload for a video on YouTube, the YouTube platform could say, hey, it looks like you have an affiliate marketing relationship in this video and you never disclosed it. Like, are you sure you want to publish this without the disclosure? Okay, cool. So that's the talk. You can download the extension if you want to try it out. And yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. I may be biased, but I thought that was a great talk. And so let's go to questions. So Pedro, do you want to just ask your question since you meet yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. So I was wondering, and I don't know if you've given some thought on this, because I can imagine there's also a lot of work to be done on the browser side of AdIntuition and the understanding. But I'm curious, now that you've built this tool, researched this tool, do you have a sense of how building this for any other medium would work and which challenges lie ahead? You know, like if I would do this for podcasts, right, where the media is completely different because it's audio only, but the same problems arise. Sometimes I'm listening to a podcast and I'm like, I think this is, this is an ad. Is it? Or is this person giving me an ad or not? And so forth. You could imagine augmented reality is a really challenging one because you don't even know what's real and so forth. Do you have thoughts on that, Michael?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I think for this study, we just focused on YouTube because it helped us like kind of narrow down our field of study, but it could definitely be extended in the future. the original study that I mentioned, they looked at YouTube and Pinterest. And so like, it could definitely be extended to Pinterest. And like your question about podcasts, there could be other ways that you could look at this. So like, we looked at just the video description, but if you looked at the video content, it would be a lot like a podcast. That was just harder because, yeah, the transcripts. It's like a speech to text would be necessary there. And so we thought that that complicated things a lot. And we saw that these signals were pretty strong as is. But it could definitely be a way to extend this in the future to look at the actual transcripts in the future.
Right. Yeah. So and I would just add on that, like, we tried looking at the actual video content, but that would require, it would either require a transcript or some other way to analyze the video to see what someone said if they disclosed it there. But text analysis is obviously much easier when there's a transcript available.
I do agree with both of you that the signals are super strong on video. Right. Like, I kind of almost can spot it, but it would be interesting to see in like things that are more subtle, like podcasts or something. Right.
Exactly. Thank you for that question. That was a really good question. Also, we have another question from Henry Filosa, who said that he's shocked that only 10% of YouTubers disclosed affiliate marketing. And is this something that the Federal Trade Commission is considering penalizing and already sending cease and desist letters for? So have you considered this as a tool for regulators? Michael?
That's super, super great question, because you're exactly correct. The FTC is regulating this, but it's kind of like, even though they have rules against it, they're not really cracking down on it. So there's a couple of cases, I think we even linked them in the paper, of the FTC that when they did crack down on this, but for the most part, it's kind of like the Wild West. Like, even though there are rules, they're not really enforced. I actually just sent a passage to Professor Chetty the other day about an influencer saying that like she tries to disclose these relationships, but for the most part, she feels like it's unregulated and she could do whatever she wanted. And so this could be something that the FTC could use to try and find undisclosed content and start cracking down on it. But right now, it doesn't seem like this is something, even though there are rules against it, that they're actually taking super seriously.
Right. And actually, I'll add on to that. So the Federal Trade Commission is now asking for guidelines on their online endorsements. And so we're actually using Michael's work and evidence from Michael's work, as well as our previous paper that Michael mentioned. We'll provide them with some guidance on how they can revise those guidelines so that they can actually get more influencers to adopt these kinds of disclosures. And I guess, right. So that was the other question, was mainly just about the regulators. So it is something that we're considering. And, now that we have more evidence from the user studies, I think that's really, it's really much more influential. Actually, a side note is that some influencers did actually change the way they disclose because of some of this research that we've done. And so they now disclose what they're doing. I don't think Blue Apron is one of those, but some of the other influencers have done that. Great. Are there any other questions that we can take? Probably have time for one more question, or if not, then I would love to thank Michael for the talk and to say thank you all for coming and attending Kai Cargo, Kai 2020. And I would like to also say, just give a little plug, which I think Pedro is going to show some slides. Before that, I wanted to mention that if you are at UChicago, we have this biweekly HCI seminar, which we call HCI Club. And I will paste the link for how you can subscribe to this biweekly seminar. And we'll have many more other events other than this. And I'll wrap it up like that and turn it over to Pedro, who will also say our thank yous for everyone that made this event possible. Take it away, Pedro.
All right, let me go back. So we're done with the closing. Thank you so much for attending. That was really exciting. As always, we want to thank the people who actually made this possible. That's, Jazz Baruch, Andrew McNutt, Julia. These are all speakers. Andrew, who gave 2 talks, Jenna, Yuxin, Shan-Yuan. I also gave a talk. And Michael, who we just heard from in his amazing talk. Also thank Jazz Brooks for doing our logo and doing the design of our agenda. That was very, very kind of you. Thanks to all the session chairs, Ben Zhao, Blaise and Marshni Chetty, who guided us through these 8 really cool talks. But especially a huge and special thanks to Tom and Rob Mitchum, who helped us really pull this off, because we're total technology noobs, and we didn't even know how to set up a Zoom chat properly, or anything like a YouTube stream. And so Tom and Rob are really the people that you should be clapping to, a Zoom clapping to thank you for this being possible. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Rob. All right, so most of all, thank you for being here. If you didn't catch any particular talk, we're trying to post videos soon on YouTube. This recording will be there. Over 100 people were here, split between here and YouTube, which is really cool. I know there's a lot of other Chi events, like the German Chi is happening right now, but you still, ended up coming to the Chicago Chi, and really thank you for that, to hear these 8 talks that I thought were really interesting. Again, as Marshni mentioned, if you're a Chicago student, you can join the HCI Club. I posted a link here that is just a redirect. This is not part of my lab, but just for you to memorize it quicker. This is lab.plopez.org/HCI Club. And Marshni is going to paste directly the link where you can subscribe. And then with the HCI Club, you can just join us on our recurring meetings. We just talk about all sorts of different things. It's very laid back. It can be like presentations like this one, but it can also just be like, hey, how do I get an internship in HCI, and how do I learn more about the field and engage with each other? That's what this is about. So yeah, that's it. Thank you once more for being here. And if you want to stick around in the Zoom chat and talk to each other, feel free to. We'll keep the room open, I believe, Marshni, for a little bit longer. Yes. If not, feel free to go do your other things and enjoy. And feel free to talk to each other, especially the students of
do you want us to do the breakout rooms, Pedro, or just no?
If people want to, I think we could do that.
Well, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Yes.
That's okay? Great.
And Rob and Tom, you can also stop the YouTube simulcast.